Scattered across the world, ancient sites stand as silent witnesses to a past we still struggle to understand. The vast stones of Baalbek Trilithon weigh hundreds of tons, yet were positioned with uncanny precision. The mysterious lines of Nazca lines stretch across the desert, visible only from the sky, raising questions about their true purpose. At Göbekli Tepe, massive carved pillars predate known civilizations, rewriting the timeline of human history. These places are more than ruins. They are enigmas. Each discovery challenges what we believe about ancient knowledge, hinting that humanity's earliest chapters may hold secrets far beyond our current understanding. The ancient city of El Tayin rises from the humid lowlands of Veracruz like a forgotten echo of a civilization that once mastered both symbolism and structure with astonishing precision. At the heart of this enigmatic site stands the iconic Pyramid of the Niches, a monument that continues to challenge archaeologists, architects, and historians alike. Unlike many other pyramidal structures of Mesoamerica, this one does not simply impress through scale or height, but through an intricate interplay of design, mathematics, light, and cultural meaning. Every surface seems intentional, every angle deliberate, and every detail part of a larger system that has yet to be fully understood. The most immediately striking feature of the pyramid is its facade, punctuated by exactly 365 recessed niches distributed across its terraces. This number, mirroring the number of days in a solar year, has led many scholars to interpret the structure as a form of monumental calendar. As sunlight moves across the structure throughout the day and year, shadows deepen within these niches, creating a dynamic visual rhythm that appears to mark the passage of time itself. Yet, despite the elegance of this theory, there is no definitive evidence confirming that the builders explicitly designed the pyramid as a calendrical device. Instead, it may represent a symbolic convergence of cosmology and architecture, where numerical patterns and visual effects were intended to evoke a deeper understanding of time rather than measure it directly. Now, light plays a crucial role in this architectural mystery. The niches are not merely decorative indentations, they are carefully proportioned cavities that interact with sunlight in a remarkably consistent way. At certain times of day, the contrast between illuminated surfaces and shadowed recesses becomes so pronounced that the pyramid appears almost animated, as if breathing in rhythm with the sun. This suggests that the builders possessed not only a keen observational understanding of solar movement, but also the technical ability to translate that knowledge into stone. The structure, in this sense, becomes a kind of ancient instrument, one that uses light instead of gears to express the passage of time. However, it is in the realm of construction technique that the pyramid reveals its most profound and perplexing secrets. Built between the 6th and 9th centuries, long before the advent of modern engineering tools, the Pyramid of the Niches demonstrates a level of precision that seems almost anachronistic. The stones used in its construction are cut and placed with extraordinary accuracy, forming clean lines and stable layers that have endured for centuries despite exposure to the elements. Each niche is remarkably uniform in size and shape, suggesting the use of standardized measurements or templates. This consistency is not easily achieved even with modern tools, raising questions about the methods and instruments available to the builders. The pyramid is composed of multiple stepped levels, each carefully aligned to maintain both structural integrity and aesthetic harmony. The angles of the terraces, the spacing of the niches, and the proportional relationships between different sections of the structure all indicate a sophisticated understanding of geometry. It is not merely a pile of stones arranged into a pyramid, it is a carefully engineered system in which weight distribution, balance, and visual symmetry are all meticulously controlled. The builders appear to have understood how to manage load-bearing forces, ensuring that the structure could support itself over long periods without significant deformation or collapse. What makes this even more intriguing is the apparent absence of advanced tools or written records describing the construction process. Unlike later civilizations that left behind detailed architectural texts, the creators of El Tagine left no clear documentation of their techniques. This forces modern researchers to rely on indirect evidence, such as tool marks, material composition, and comparative analysis with other sites. Yet even with these methods, many aspects of the construction remain unclear. How were the stones quarried and transported? What techniques were used to achieve such precise cuts? How did the builders ensure uniformity across hundreds of niches without modern measuring devices? Some researchers propose that the builders used simple but highly effective tools, combined with an advanced understanding of proportion and repetition. Others suggest that the construction process may have involved specialized labor groups, to each responsible for a specific aspect of the structure, from stone cutting to placement and finishing. There is also the possibility that knowledge was passed down through generations in the form of oral tradition, allowing techniques to be refined over time. However, none of these explanations fully account for the level of precision observed in the pyramid. Adding to the mystery is the original coloration of the structure. Today, the pyramid appears as weathered stone, but evidence suggests that it was once painted in vivid colors, with deep red surfaces contrasting sharply against the dark interiors of the niches. This color scheme would have amplified the visual impact of the structure, especially under direct sunlight, creating a striking interplay between light, shadow, and color. The niches, this appearing almost black against the red background, may have symbolized portals or voids, perhaps representing entrances to another realm or dimensions of existence beyond the physical world. Culturally, the pyramid is associated with the Totonac civilization, a society that remains less understood compared to its more famous neighbors like the Maya civilization or the Aztec civilization. This relative obscurity only deepens the sense of mystery surrounding the site. The architectural style of El Tagine does not fully align with those of these other civilizations, suggesting either a unique cultural trajectory or a complex network of influences that has yet to be fully mapped. The Pyramid of the Niches, therefore, stands not only as a physical structure, but also as a cultural statement, one that reflects a distinct world-view encoded in stone. Despite decades of research, the true purpose of the pyramid remains elusive. Was it primarily a ceremonial structure, a cosmological model, or a functional tool for tracking time? Or was it all of these at once, serving multiple roles within the society that built it? The lack of definitive answers is not due to a lack of effort, but rather to the depth of the mystery itself. Every new discovery seems to raise as many questions as it answers, reinforcing the idea that the Pyramid of the Niches is not merely an archaeological artifact, but a puzzle, one that continues to challenge our understanding of ancient knowledge and capability. In the end, and what makes the Pyramid of the Niches so compelling is not just what we know about it, but what we do not. Its precise construction, its symbolic complexity, and its interaction with natural elements all point to a level of sophistication that defies simple explanation. It forces us to reconsider our assumptions about ancient technology and to acknowledge that there may be aspects of past civilizations that we have yet to fully comprehend. Standing before it, one cannot help but feel that this structure was designed not only to endure through time, but to communicate across it, leaving behind a silent message carved into stone, waiting for those who come later to decipher its meaning. In your opinion, how did ancient builders achieve such near-perfect construction precision without modern technology? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Kano City Wall stands as one of the most extraordinary yet underappreciated achievements of pre-modern engineering in Nigeria. Encircling the historic city of Kano, this immense defensive structure once stretched for more than 14 kilometers, with towering earthen ramparts rising up to 15 meters in height. Constructed and expanded between the 11th and 15th centuries under the Hausa kingdoms, the wall was far more than a physical boundary. It was a manifestation of political authority, urban sophistication, and technological mastery in a region often overlooked in global narratives of ancient architecture. From a distance, the wall seems almost natural, blending seamlessly into the reddish Sahelian landscape, as if it had emerged from the earth itself. Yet as one approaches, its deliberate structure, immense scale, and an enduring presence reveal a level of precision and planning that challenges long-held assumptions about ancient construction, especially the belief that only stone can produce monuments capable of surviving the centuries. The Kano City Wall defies that assumption entirely, and in doing so, introduces one of its most profound mysteries. How could a structure made primarily of earth endure for hundreds of years in an environment defined by both torrential rains and relentless heat? The sheer scale of the Kano City Wall reflects not only ambition, but also a highly organized and deeply strategic urban vision. Enclosing the entirety of the ancient city, the wall functioned as a protective shell around a vibrant and complex urban environment that included bustling markets, royal compounds, religious centers, and densely populated residential districts. More than 15 gates punctuated its length, each carefully positioned and engineered to regulate movement, control trade, and enhance security. These gates were not randomly placed. They corresponded to major trade routes and internal pathways, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of both economic flow and defensive necessity. The city within the walls was not merely protected, it was structured, controlled, and optimized. Unlike many defensive structures that appear reactive or hastily constructed, the Kano City Wall reveals careful integration with the surrounding landscape. It follows natural contours, reinforcing vulnerable points and maximizing visibility across open terrain. Its immense scale rivals some of the world's most famous fortifications, including the Great Wall of China, yet it achieves this scale through entirely different means, without stone blocks, without mortar, and without the technologies typically associated with monumental construction. Instead, it relies on something far more deceptively simple: earth. At the heart of the Kano City Wall lies its most astonishing and enigmatic feature, its construction technique. Built almost entirely from compacted earth, the wall stands in direct contradiction to what modern intuition might suggest about durability. In a region where heavy seasonal rains can rapidly erode exposed surfaces, followed by months of intense solar radiation that cracks and weakens materials, a structure made of soil should, by all expectations, deteriorate quickly. And yet, the Kano City Wall has endured for centuries, with significant portions still standing today. This paradox is not merely impressive, it is deeply mysterious. The secret lies in a highly refined form of rammed earth construction, a technique that, while known in various parts of the ancient world, appears to have been executed here with an exceptional level of precision and understanding. Layers of soil were systematically compacted using repeated force, transforming loose earth into dense, stone-like masses. This was not a crude piling of dirt. It was a controlled and deliberate process requiring knowledge of material behavior, moisture balance, and structural pressure. The builders likely selected specific soil compositions, favoring clay-rich earth for its natural binding properties. To this base, they appear to have added organic stabilizers, possibly straw, ash, and or fibrous plant matter, which would have acted as natural reinforcement, reducing shrinkage, limiting cracks, and enhancing overall cohesion. What makes this even more remarkable is the possibility that the builders understood not only the ingredients, but also the timing. The moisture content of the soil would have been critical. Too wet, and the structure would lose shape. Too dry, and proper compaction would be impossible. Achieving the ideal balance required either empirical experimentation over generations or a deeply intuitive understanding of environmental conditions. This suggests that the knowledge behind the Kano city wall was not accidental. It was the result of accumulated expertise, refined over time, and transmitted through practice rather than written instruction. Equally important was the geometry of the wall itself. Rather than constructing sheer vertical faces, the builders designed gently sloping sides that allowed water to flow off naturally, minimizing infiltration and erosion. The base of the wall was significantly thicker than the top, distributing weight and enhancing stability. In some sections, the wall may have been periodically resurfaced, indicating a system of maintenance that further contributed to its longevity. These design choices reveal a holistic understanding of how materials interact with climate, an understanding that modern engineers are only beginning to fully appreciate. And yet, despite advances in engineering science, replicating the exact durability of the Kano walls remains challenging. Modern rammed earth structures can indeed be strong, but they often require additives such as cement or chemical stabilizers to achieve comparable longevity. The Kano city wall, by contrast, appears to have relied almost entirely on natural materials. This raises an intriguing question. Did the ancient builders possess specific techniques or material combinations that have since been lost? Were there subtle details, such as the sequence of layering, the type of compaction tools, or the seasonal timing of construction, that played a critical role but are no longer understood? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how the wall was built, but why this knowledge did not survive in a form that could be easily rediscovered. In the absence of written documentation, the techniques may have been passed down orally through specialized guilds or family traditions. Over time, and as political structures changed and the importance of such large-scale construction diminished, this knowledge may have faded, leaving behind only the silent evidence embedded in the wall itself. Beyond its material ingenuity, the Kano city wall also embodies a sophisticated approach to defense. The gates were engineered as choke points, often forcing entrance through narrow, indirect paths that reduce speed and exposed potential attackers. Some entrances may have incorporated angled or zigzag layouts, preventing direct access and limiting the effectiveness of large group movements. Combined with external features such as trenches or moats, the wall formed a layered defensive system that was both practical and strategically advanced. Within the protection of the wall, Kano flourished as a major hub in the trans-Saharan trade network. Caravans carrying gold, salt, textiles, and leather passed through its gates, connecting West Africa with North Africa and beyond. The walls safeguarded not only people, but also wealth, knowledge, and cultural exchange. It symbolized stability in a region defined by movement and interaction, reinforcing Kano's status as a powerful and influential center of civilization. Despite its historical significance, many aspects of the Kano city wall remain unresolved. Who first envisioned such an ambitious structure? How was the labor organized to construct something of this scale without modern machinery? What exact techniques allowed earth to rival stone in durability? And perhaps most intriguingly, was why has this achievement remained relatively obscure in global discourse on ancient engineering? The ancient Kano city wall is not merely a relic of the past. It is a profound testament to human ingenuity, expressed through the most fundamental of materials. Its immense scale, strategic sophistication, and above all, its extraordinary durability challenge conventional narratives about what ancient societies were capable of achieving. Within its weathered surface lies a story not only of a once protected city, but also of a system of knowledge that may never be fully recovered. A reminder that some of humanity's greatest innovations are not always carved in stone, but shaped from the earth itself. What do you think? Could the extraordinary durability of the ancient Kano city wall be the result of lost engineering knowledge, or simply centuries of refined trial and error? Share your thoughts in the comments below. High above the mist-laden valleys of northern Peru, clinging to sheer limestone cliffs as if defying both gravity and time, the Revash cliff tombs stand as one of the most haunting and enigmatic legacies of the ancient Chachapoya civilization. Known as the Warriors of the Clouds, the Chachapoya people inhabited the dense cloud forests of the Andes long before the rise of the Inca Empire, and yet despite their relative obscurity in mainstream history, they left behind architectural and cultural expressions that continue to puzzle archaeologists and historians alike. Among these, the Revash cliff tombs are perhaps the most visually striking. Small, house-like mausoleums painted in vivid colors, perched precariously on vertical rock faces, inaccessible to all but the most determined climbers. From a distance, might they resemble a forgotten village frozen in time, suspended between earth and sky, guarding secrets that have endured for centuries. The location of the Revash tombs is itself the first layer of mystery. Built high into the cliffs of the Amazonas region, these structures are not easily reached even today, requiring steep ascents and careful navigation through rugged terrain. This raises immediate and compelling questions. How did the Chachapoya transport construction materials to such heights without modern tools or machinery? What methods did they use to secure these tombs so firmly into the rock face? While some researchers suggest the use of wooden scaffolding or rope systems, no definitive physical evidence has survived to confirm these theories. The very act of construction in such a location implies not only remarkable engineering ingenuity, but also a deliberate cultural or spiritual choice. It is widely believed that the elevation served a protective purpose, shielding the dead from grave robbers, wild animals, and environmental threats. But this practical explanation may only scratch the surface. In many ancient cultures, height is associated with proximity to the divine, suggesting that placing the dead high above the ground may have symbolized a closer connection to the heavens. Equally fascinating is the architectural design of the tombs themselves. Unlike typical burial chambers or underground crypts, the Revash mausoleums are constructed to resemble miniature houses, complete with sloped roofs, small doorways, and painted facades. This deliberate imitation of domestic architecture suggests a belief system in which death was not an end, but a transition into another form of existence, one that mirrored life in the physical world. The dead were not simply buried, they were housed, preserved within structures that echoed the living spaces they once occupied. This concept of an afterlife continuity is reinforced by the presence of multiple individuals within a single tomb, along with pottery, textiles, and other grave goods, indicating that these were communal resting places, possibly for family groups or social units. The tombs, therefore, functioned not only as burial sites, but as symbolic dwellings for the deceased, maintaining a connection between the living and the dead. However, among all these remarkable features, there's one aspect stands out as particularly baffling and worthy of deeper attention: the extraordinary preservation and resilience of the tomb's painted colors. Even after centuries of exposure to harsh environmental conditions, intense sunlight, heavy rainfall, fluctuating temperatures, and the erosive forces of wind, the red and white pigments adorning the Revash tombs remain strikingly visible. This durability is not merely a matter of chance. It points to a level of material knowledge and technical sophistication that challenges conventional assumptions about pre-Columbian societies in the region. The pigments, likely derived from natural mineral sources such as iron oxides for red and kaolin or lime-based compounds for white, were applied in geometric patterns and symbolic motifs that still retain their clarity and contrast today. But what makes this truly mysterious is not just the choice of materials, but the method of their preparation and application. Modern analysis suggests that the Chachapoya may have used binding agents, possibly organic substances like plant resins, animal fats, or other natural adhesives, to enhance the longevity of the paint. These substances could have created a protective layer that bonded the pigment to the stone's surface, making it resistant to weathering. Yet, the exact composition of these mixtures remains uncertain, as the passage of time has altered or degraded any organic components that might have been present. Furthermore, the placement of the tombs themselves may have contributed to the preservation of the colors. Built into recessed portions of the cliff, many of the mausoleums are partially shielded from direct rainfall and excessive sunlight, creating a microenvironment that slows the process of deterioration. Still, even with these protective factors, the level of preservation observed at Revash is exceptional and not easily replicated, even with modern techniques. This raises an intriguing possibility that the Chachapoya possessed a deeper understanding of environmental interaction and material science than previously acknowledged. Their ability to select the right combination of pigments, binders, and architectural placement suggests a sophisticated approach to construction, one that integrated aesthetic, symbolic, and practical considerations into a unified whole. The colors themselves may have held cultural or spiritual significance. Red, often associated with life, blood, and vitality, could symbolize the enduring presence of the deceased, while white might represent purity, transition, or the spiritual realm. The geometric patterns and motifs, some resembling crosses or stylized animals, may have conveyed protective meanings or encoded aspects of Chachapoya cosmology. In this sense, the painted surfaces of the tombs are not merely decorative, they are communicative, serving as visual expressions of belief systems that have otherwise been lost to time. The mystery deepens when these tombs are considered in the broader context of Chachapoya culture and their eventual disappearance. Following their conquest by the Inca in the late 15th century, the Chachapoya population declined rapidly, due in part to forced relocation, disease, and cultural assimilation. As a result, much of their knowledge, including construction techniques and artistic practices, was never recorded or passed down in a way that could be preserved. The Revash cliff tombs, therefore, represent not only a physical remnant of this lost civilization, but also a fragment of its intellectual and spiritual heritage. They are silent witnesses to a way of life that has vanished, leaving behind only clues etched in stone and pigment. In comparison to other cliff burial sites around the world, such as the hanging coffins of China or the rock-cut tombs of Petra, the Revash tombs stand out for their combination of architectural mimicry, communal burial practices, and most notably, their enduring coloration. While other cultures have also placed their dead in elevated or difficult-to-reach locations, few have done so with such a distinctive aesthetic signature. Now the painted facades of Revash transform these tombs from mere burial sites into visual landmarks, asserting a presence that transcends time and decay. They invite not only observation, but interpretation, challenging us to reconsider what we know about ancient technologies and the people who developed them. Ultimately, the Revash cliff tombs are more than an archaeological curiosity. They are a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring desire to honor the dead. Their mysterious construction, symbolic architecture, and remarkably preserved colors form a narrative that is both compelling and incomplete. Each unanswered question, how they were built, what the colors truly meant, why they have lasted so long, adds to their allure, drawing us deeper into the story of a civilization that once thrived in the clouds. Yes, and perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. Not just how the Chachapoya created these remarkable structures, but how much of their knowledge has been lost, waiting to be rediscovered in the silent, painted walls of Revash. How do you think the Chachapoya were able to create such long-lasting pigments without modern technology? Share your theory in the comments below. Castellon Alto terraced village stands as one of the most intriguing and visually striking Bronze Age settlements ever discovered in the Iberian Peninsula. A place where architecture, environment, and human ingenuity converge in ways that continue to challenge modern understanding. Perched dramatically on a steep hillside near present-day Galera in southern Spain, this ancient community immediately distinguishes itself through its remarkable terraced design, an arrangement of homes and pathways carefully carved into the slope, rising layer upon layer like a stone staircase etched into the landscape. At first glance, it feels almost modern in its logic, resembling contemporary hillside urban planning. Yet it was constructed over 3,000 years ago by people working with tools and knowledge that we often underestimate. The very existence of such a settlement raises profound questions. How did its builders achieve such structural stability on uneven terrain? How did they coordinate construction across multiple levels? And what kind of social organization was required to sustain such a complex living environment? The terraced architecture of Castellon Alto is not merely an aesthetic feature. It reflects a deeply strategic approach to survival and community life. Each level of the settlement appears to have been deliberately planned, with houses arranged in a way that maximize space, sunlight, and accessibility while also providing natural defensive advantages. Narrow pathways and stair-like connections linked the terraces, allowing movement throughout the village without sacrificing structural cohesion. From higher levels, non-inhabitants would have enjoyed commanding views of the surrounding valley, making it easier to monitor both environmental changes and potential threats. This vertical organization suggests a sophisticated understanding of both geography and collective living, indicating that the people of Castellon Alto were not isolated or primitive, but rather part of a culture capable of advanced planning and adaptation. Inside the dwellings themselves, archaeological evidence reveals an equally compelling story. Far from being simple shelters, these homes were structured with distinct functional areas, spaces designated for cooking, storage, and daily activities. Hearths indicate the central role of fire not only for warmth and food preparation, but also as a focal point of domestic life. Storage areas suggest careful management of resources, and possibly including grains, tools, and preserved foods, pointing to a community that anticipated seasonal changes and understood the importance of sustainability. The presence of such organized interiors implies a level of routine and social stability that contradicts outdated assumptions about Bronze Age societies. These were people who lived with intention, who shaped their environment to support not just survival, but continuity. One of the most astonishing discoveries at Castellon Alto, however, lies not in its architecture, but in its human remains. Archaeologists uncovered bodies that had undergone natural mummification, preserved in extraordinary detail due to the unique environmental conditions of the site. In some cases, even hair remained intact, offering a rare and intimate glimpse into the physical appearance of individuals who lived thousands of years ago. Unlike the deliberate mummification practices of ancient Egypt, this preservation occurred without human intervention, the result of a delicate balance of temperature, dryness, and perhaps other factors not yet fully understood. This phenomenon adds another layer of mystery to Castellon Alto. What exact conditions allowed such preservation, and why are they so rarely replicated elsewhere? It is a reminder that the site is not only a cultural artifact, but also a natural anomaly, a place where the environment itself participated in the preservation of history. Beyond individual homes and bodies, the layout of the village hints at a structured social hierarchy. The positioning of larger and more robust dwellings on higher terraces suggests that status may have been physically represented in the architecture of the settlement. Those living above would have had better views, greater security, and perhaps greater influence within the community. Meanwhile, simpler structures below may have housed individuals of lower status or different roles within the society. This vertical stratification mirrors patterns seen in other ancient cultures, where elevation often symbolized power, authority, or spiritual significance. Yet, without written records, the exact nature of this hierarchy remains speculative, leaving researchers to piece together clues from spatial organization and material remains. Despite these insights into daily life and social structure, one of the most compelling aspects of Castellon Alto is its apparent lack of evidence for large-scale conflict. The settlement's design certainly offered defensive advantages, yet archaeologists have found little to suggest that it was ever the site of major warfare or violent destruction. There are no clear burn layers, no widespread signs of trauma among the remains, no indication of a catastrophic invasion. This absence is, in itself, a puzzle. Why would a community invest in a defensible location, if not for protection against enemies? Was the threat more environmental than human, or was the mere possibility of conflict enough to shape their choices? The silence of the archaeological record on this matter only deepens the sense of enigma surrounding the site. And then we arrive at the greatest mystery of all, the question that lingers long after every artifact has been catalogued and every structure mapped. Why was Castellon Alto abandoned? Unlike many ancient sites that bear the scars of destruction, This village seems to have been left behind in a more ambiguous manner. There is no single, definitive layer of evidence pointing to a sudden disaster. Instead, what remains suggests a gradual cessation of life, a quiet departure, rather than a violent end. This raises a series of possibilities, each compelling, yet incomplete. One theory points to environmental change. Over time, shifts in climate could have altered the availability of water, reduced agricultural productivity, or made the hillside less viable for sustaining a growing population. Even subtle changes, slightly less rainfall, gradual soil degradation, could have had profound effects on a community so closely tied to its immediate surroundings. If resources became scarce, the inhabitants may have chosen to relocate rather than endure increasing hardship. Yet, if this were the case, why is there no clear evidence of adaptation before abandonment? Why does the settlement not show signs of struggle, improvisation, or decline? Another possibility lies in social dynamics. Communities are not static, and internal tensions, whether political, economic, or cultural, can lead to fragmentation and migration. Perhaps Castellon Alto experienced a shift in leadership, a breakdown in social cohesion, or a reorganization of trade networks that made its location less advantageous. In such a scenario, the abandonment would not be a response to external forces, but rather the result of internal transformation. However, without written records or clear indicators of conflict, this remains a hypothesis built on inference rather than direct evidence. There is also the question of broader regional changes. Castellon Alto did not exist in isolation. It was part of a wider network of Bronze Age communities across the Iberian Peninsula. If trade routes shifted, if new centers of power emerged, or if neighboring settlements offered better opportunities, the inhabitants may have gradually dispersed, drawn away by the promise of more favorable conditions elsewhere. This kind of migration would leave behind a site that appears intact yet empty, its structures frozen in time as life moved on beyond its boundaries. What makes this mystery so compelling is not just the lack of a clear answer, but the way in which all available explanations seem to fall short. Each theory accounts for certain aspects of the evidence, yet none fully captures the complexity of the site. Castellon Alto resists simple narratives. It does not conform to the familiar patterns of rise and fall, destruction and rebirth. Instead, it exists in a space of uncertainty, where the past refuses to be neatly categorized. In the end, Castellon Alto Terraced Village is more than an archaeological site. It is a reminder of how much we still do not understand about ancient human societies. It challenges assumptions about technological capability, social organization, and the factors that shape the fate of communities. Most of all, it invites us to confront the limits of our knowledge. For all the tools of modern archaeology, for all the data we can gather and analyze, there remain places, like Castellon Alto, where the most important questions linger unanswered. Why was it built with such care, only to be left behind? What invisible forces shaped its destiny? And how many other stories like this have been lost to time, waiting quietly beneath the surface, just beyond the reach of certainty? What do you think truly caused Castellon Alto to be abandoned? Environmental changes, internal conflicts, or a mystery we still haven't uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Cerro de las Cabezas, Oppidum rises quietly above the plains of central Spain, an ancient Iberian settlement that, at first glance, appears to be just another archaeological site of weathered stone and broken walls. Yet beneath its silence lies the story of a community that was far more sophisticated than once believed, a city that flourished, organized, produced, defended itself, and then, for reasons still not fully understood, vanished from history with an abruptness that continues to puzzle researchers. Unlike many ancient ruins that evolved gradually or were continuously inhabited across centuries, Cerro de las Cabezas seems to capture a moment in time, frozen at the edge of disappearance, offering clues that are both revealing and deeply enigmatic. What makes this site particularly striking is the level of urban planning evident throughout its remains. The settlement was not a random cluster of dwellings, but a deliberately structured environment. Streets were laid out with intention. Residential areas were distinct from zones of production, and the overall layout suggests a community that understood spatial organization and civic planning. This challenges earlier assumptions about Iberian societies as loosely organized tribal groups, instead pointing toward a more complex social structure capable of coordinating labor, resources, and long-term development. The very existence of such planning raises questions about the governing systems behind it. Who designed this city, and what kind of authority ensured its execution? Encircling the settlement is a formidable defensive system, composed of thick stone walls, reinforced with strategically positioned towers and controlled entry points. These fortifications were not symbolic, they were functional, designed with a clear understanding of defense. Their presence implies a perceived threat, significant enough to justify the investment of time and resources required for such construction. Yet the identity of that threat remains unclear. Was the city guarding against rival Iberian groups, or was it already reacting to the growing influence of external powers such as the expanding Roman Republic? The walls stand today as silent witnesses to fears that have long since lost their context. Equally compelling is the evidence of industrial activity within the city, as particularly the large-scale production of pottery. Excavations have uncovered numerous kilns and finely crafted ceramic goods, indicating that Cerro de las Cabezas was not merely self-sufficient, but potentially engaged in broader trade networks. The quality and quantity of these artifacts suggest specialization, economic organization, and possibly even export beyond the immediate region. If this was indeed a production hub, it would have required stable trade routes, reliable partners, and a degree of political stability, conditions that make the city's sudden disappearance all the more perplexing. One of the most dramatic aspects of the site is the widespread evidence of destruction by fire. Burn layers appear across multiple structures, suggesting that the settlement experienced a significant and possibly catastrophic event. No, this was not a localized accident. The pattern indicates a coordinated or large-scale incident that affected much of the city. Whether this destruction was the result of an external attack, internal conflict, or a deliberate act carried out by its own inhabitants remains uncertain. The intensity of the burning implies urgency and violence, yet the absence of clear evidence pointing to a specific cause leaves the narrative incomplete. Despite its advantageous location, well-positioned for both defense and access to surrounding regions, the city was ultimately abandoned. This decision is perhaps the most puzzling aspect of Cerro de las Cabezas. Settlements with such strategic value are rarely left behind without compelling reason. The abandonment does not appear to have been followed by reoccupation or redevelopment, suggesting that whatever drove the inhabitants away had a lasting impact. The site did not transition into a new phase of life. Instead, it fell into silence. This leads to the central and most enduring mystery. Why did Cerro de las Cabezas disappear? The question is not simply about physical destruction, but about the complete cessation of its role as a living community. Several hypotheses attempt to address this, yet none provide a definitive answer. One possibility is that the city fell victim to the expanding reach of Rome during the period of conquest in the Iberian Peninsula. If so, the destruction layers could represent a military campaign, and the abandonment might reflect forced displacement or assimilation into Roman-controlled territories. However, the archaeological evidence does not conclusively confirm a direct Roman assault, leaving this theory plausible but unproven. Another explanation considers economic collapse. If Cerro de las Cabezas depended heavily on trade, particularly in pottery, then shifts in trade routes or the emergence of more dominant economic centers could have undermined its viability. A decline in demand or access to markets might have triggered a gradual weakening of the city's economic foundation, eventually leading to its abandonment. Yet this does not fully account for the signs of sudden destruction, which suggest a more abrupt turning point rather than a slow decline. Environmental factors also enter the discussion. Changes in climate, water availability, and agricultural productivity could have made the area less sustainable for long-term habitation. While such factors often play a role in the fate of ancient settlements, there is limited direct evidence linking environmental stress to the specific case of Cerro de las Cabezas. Without clear indicators of drought, soil depletion, or natural disaster, this hypothesis remains speculative. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that the inhabitants themselves chose to leave, intentionally abandoning the city in response to a combination of pressures. This could have been a strategic relocation, a cultural shift, or a reaction to threats that are no longer visible in the archaeological record. The presence of widespread burning might even suggest a deliberate act of destruction, either as a defensive measure to prevent enemy use or as part of a ritual closure of the settlement. If this were the case, then Cerro de las Cabezas was not simply destroyed, but consciously erased, its people carrying their lives elsewhere while leaving behind a controlled ruin. What makes this mystery so compelling is the lack of closure. Unlike other ancient sites, where inscriptions, historical records, or continuous occupation provide a narrative bridge, Cerro de las Cabezas offers only fragments. Its streets, walls, kilns, and ashes speak, but they do not explain. The city appears to have reached a point where its story diverged from the expected trajectory of growth or transformation, and instead entered a void, a disappearance that resists easy interpretation. In the end, Cerro de las Cabezas Oppidum stands as a testament to both the achievements and the uncertainties of the ancient world. It reveals a society capable of organization, production, and defense, yet it also embodies the fragility of human settlements. In the face of forces we may never fully understand, the question of why it vanished is not merely an academic puzzle. It is a reminder that even the most structured and thriving communities can be undone by a convergence of factors that leave little trace behind. And so, the ruins remain, not just as remnants of what once was, but as an enduring question carved into the landscape: what happened here, and why did it all come to an end? What do you think truly caused Cerro de las Cabezas to disappear? War, crisis, or a mysterious decision by its own inhabitants? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the arid cliffs and plateaus of Mali, within the ancient settlements of the Dogon people, stands a structure that at first glance appears deceptively simple: a low-roofed shelter made of wood, earth, and carefully arranged beams. Yet the Toguna is far more than a physical construction. It is an embodiment of social order, a behavioral regulator, a philosophical statement, and perhaps one of the most subtle yet powerful examples of architecture shaping human interaction in the ancient world. Known as the meeting place of elders, the Toguna functions as the intellectual and political heart of the Dogon community, where disputes are settled, decisions are made, and collective wisdom is preserved and transmitted. However, and beneath its modest appearance lies a deeper mystery, one that becomes even more compelling when we consider not only how it works, but why such a remarkably effective design did not spread beyond this culture. The most striking feature of the Toguna is its unusually low roof, often constructed at a height of little more than 1 meter. This design forces anyone inside to sit or crouch, making it physically impossible to stand upright. While this might initially seem like a limitation or a consequence of available materials, it is in fact a deliberate and highly sophisticated choice. By removing the ability to stand, the structure eliminates one of the most fundamental expressions of dominance in human interaction. No individual can rise above the others, gesture aggressively, or physically impose themselves during a heated discussion. In this confined space, the body is subdued, and as a result, so too is the ego. Conversations must unfold within the boundaries of calmness, patience, and restraint. The architecture itself enforces a code of conduct, ensuring that dialogue remains controlled and that conflict does not escalate into violence. Inside the Toguna, the atmosphere is not one of chaos or argument, but of measured deliberation. It is a place reserved primarily for elder men, those who have accumulated experience, knowledge, and social respect over time. Here, authority is not derived from physical strength or wealth, but from wisdom and memory. Decisions are reached through discussion rather than decree, and the low roof plays a silent yet constant role in maintaining this balance. It is as if the building itself participates in the governance of the community, shaping not only the physical posture of its occupants, but also their mental state. This integration of environment and behavior suggests a level of cultural and psychological insight that is both profound and rare. Supporting the roof are wooden pillars, often intricately carved with symbolic figures representing ancestors, spiritual entities, and elements of Dogon cosmology. These carvings are not merely decorative. They serve as visual reminders of lineage, belief, and continuity. Each pillar stands as a connection between the present and the past, reinforcing the idea that every decision made within the Toguna is part of a larger, ongoing narrative. Some interpretations suggest that these symbols encode knowledge about the universe, life cycles, and spiritual order, though many of their meanings remain partially understood. This adds another layer of mystery to the structure, hinting that the Toguna may also function as a space where metaphysical ideas are contemplated and preserved. There are even more controversial theories that link Dogon knowledge to advanced astronomical understanding, particularly concerning the Sirius star system. While these claims are debated and often challenged by scholars, they contribute to the aura of mystery surrounding Dogon culture, and by extension, the Toguna itself. If the Toguna is indeed a place where knowledge, both practical and esoteric, is transmitted across generations, then its significance extends far beyond local governance. It becomes a vessel of intellectual continuity and a repository of ideas that may have origins deeper and more complex than currently understood. Yet perhaps the most intriguing and perplexing aspect of the Toguna is not how it functions, but why its underlying concept did not become widespread. This brings us to the central mystery. If the Toguna's design is so effective at reducing conflict, encouraging thoughtful dialogue, and maintaining social harmony, Why do we not see similar structures replicated across other cultures and civilizations? One possible explanation lies in the uniqueness of the cultural context in which the Toguna exists. The Dogon society places a strong emphasis on respect for elders, oral tradition, and communal decision-making. The Toguna works because it is deeply embedded within these values. In a different cultural setting, where authority might be more hierarchical, or where individual expression is prioritized over collective harmony, the same architectural constraints might be resisted or even rejected. The success of the Toguna may therefore depend not only on its physical design, but also on the social framework that supports it. Another possibility is that similar concepts may have existed in other parts of the world, but were not preserved or recognized in the same way. History is filled with examples of knowledge and practices that were lost due to war, migration, or cultural transformation. It is conceivable that other societies once experimented with architectural methods of behavioral control, but these ideas did not survive the passage of time. If so, the Toguna may represent a rare surviving example of a broader, largely forgotten approach to social organization. There is also the question of whether modern societies, with their increasing complexity and scale, would even be capable of adopting such a model. The Toguna operates within small, tightly knit communities, where individuals share common values and direct relationships. In larger, more diverse populations, the dynamics of interaction are far more complicated. Attempting to impose a similar physical constraint on behavior might not yield the same results, or could even produce unintended consequences. The simplicity that makes the Toguna effective may also limit its applicability beyond its original context. Still, the absence of widespread adoption does not diminish the brilliance of the concept. On the contrary, it highlights just how unique and advanced this approach is. The Toguna demonstrates that architecture can do more than provide shelter. It can shape thought, guide behavior, and reinforce cultural ideals in ways that are both subtle and powerful. It challenges modern assumptions about design, suggesting that the spaces we inhabit could play a far greater role in influencing how we communicate, resolve conflict, and coexist. In the end, the Dogon Toguna stands as both a functional structure and an enduring mystery. It is a testament to the ingenuity of a culture that understood, perhaps more deeply than most, the relationship between environment and human behavior. And it leaves us with a compelling question that remains unanswered. If humanity once possessed the insight to build spaces that encourage peace and understanding so effectively, why have we not embraced or rediscovered such wisdom on a larger scale? El Paraiso Temple rises from the arid coastal plains of Peru like a silent memory carved into earth and time, a vast and ancient complex that predates the Inca by nearly 2 millennia and yet remains far less understood than the civilizations that came after it. Situated near modern-day Lima, this sprawling site, composed of massive adobe structures and low pyramid-like forms, stretches across more than 50 hectares, suggesting a scale of organization and labor that defies the simplicity often attributed to early societies. From a distance, the structures appear almost natural, blending into the desert landscape, but closer inspection reveals careful planning, deliberate symmetry, and an architectural vision that speaks of a people with both technical skill and cultural purpose. And yet, for all its size and complexity, El Paraiso is eerily quiet in the archaeological record. There are no grand carvings, no written inscriptions, no obvious signs of rulers or kings. It is as if an entire society expressed itself through space and structure rather than through words or images, leaving behind a monumental enigma. Excavations have uncovered rooms that appear to have been used for ritual purposes, particularly chambers centered around hearths that show evidence of controlled and repeated burning. These were not simple domestic fires, but carefully maintained ceremonial flames, suggesting that fire held a central place in the spiritual life of the people who built El Paraiso. The architecture itself seems designed to guide movement and focus attention, with corridors and enclosed spaces that may have been used for processions or rites of passage. The lack of domestic artifacts in many areas further supports the idea that this was not a conventional settlement, but rather a ceremonial or administrative center, perhaps visited periodically by groups from surrounding regions. This raises an intriguing possibility that El Paraiso functioned as a kind of pilgrimage site, a sacred landscape where communities gathered to participate in shared rituals that reinforced social cohesion and cosmological beliefs. The construction techniques employed at El Paraiso are themselves remarkable, particularly when considered in the context of its age. The builders used large adobe bricks, arranged in layered formations that provided both stability and durability. The walls are thick and often aligned with a degree of precision that suggests not only practical knowledge, but also an aesthetic or symbolic intent. Some structures exhibit a form of modular planning, where repeated units are arranged in a coherent layout, hinting at an early understanding of architectural standardization. This level of sophistication challenges assumptions about the capabilities of pre-ceramic or early ceramic societies in the region, and suggests that complex engineering knowledge may have developed independently in multiple parts of the ancient world. Yet perhaps the most perplexing aspect of El Paraiso is its relationship with its environment. Located near the Pacific coast, the site does not appear to have relied heavily on marine resources, nor does it show clear evidence of intensive agriculture. This is unusual, as most large ancient settlements are closely tied to reliable food sources, whether through farming, fishing, or trade. The apparent absence of a strong economic base raises questions about how the population sustained itself and what role the site played within a broader regional network. It is possible that El Paraiso was supported by surrounding communities, serving as a central hub for ritual and coordination, rather than as a self-sufficient city. If so, its existence would reflect a level of social organization that is both complex and decentralized, a system in which meaning and identity were constructed through shared practices rather than centralized authority. All of these mysteries, however, lead to a single, haunting question that defines El Paraiso more than any other. Why was it abandoned? Unlike many ancient sites that bear the scars of conflict or catastrophe, El Paraiso offers no clear evidence of violent destruction. There are no signs of widespread burning that would indicate invasion, no mass graves that suggest sudden death, no collapsed structures that point to earthquakes or natural disasters of overwhelming force. Instead, the site appears to have been left behind in a manner that is almost deliberate, as if its builders and inhabitants simply chose to walk away. This quiet abandonment is perhaps more unsettling than any dramatic end, because it implies a decision, a turning point that we can sense but not fully understand. One possibility is that environmental changes gradually made the area less viable. The coastal deserts of Peru are highly sensitive to shifts in climate, yet particularly those associated with phenomena like El Niño, which can bring sudden floods or prolonged droughts. A series of such events could have disrupted the delicate balance that sustained the communities connected to El Paraiso, forcing them to relocate to more stable regions. However, this explanation, while plausible, does not fully account for the lack of transitional evidence. One might expect to see signs of adaptation or decline, a gradual reduction in activity, but instead, the archaeological record suggests a more abrupt cessation. Another theory centers on changes in belief systems. If El Paraiso was indeed a ceremonial center, its significance would have been tied closely to the spiritual framework of its people. A shift in cosmology, the emergence of new religious practices, or the rise of alternative sacred sites could have rendered El Paraiso obsolete. In such a scenario, abandonment would not have been a sign of failure, but of transformation, a collective decision to move on from one set of meanings to another. This idea is supported by the absence of destruction, as well as by the continued development of other cultural centers in the region. Yet it also raises deeper questions about how and why such profound shifts occur, and what experiences might have driven an entire society to redefine its relationship with the sacred. There is also the possibility of social reorganization. The scale of El Paraiso implies a level of coordination that may not have been sustainable indefinitely. As populations grew or dispersed, the centralized functions of the site may have become less relevant, and leading to its gradual disuse. Alternatively, emerging power structures elsewhere could have drawn people away, concentrating resources and attention in new locations. In this sense, El Paraiso might represent an early experiment in large-scale social integration, one that ultimately gave way to different forms of organization better suited to changing conditions. What makes the mystery of its abandonment so compelling is not just the lack of answers, but the nature of the questions it forces us to ask. El Paraiso challenges the assumption that ancient societies followed linear paths of development, progressing steadily from simplicity to complexity. Instead, it suggests a more fluid and dynamic process in which communities could achieve remarkable levels of organization and then, for reasons we may never fully grasp, choose to abandon them. It reminds us that history is not only shaped by what endures, but also by what is left behind, by the spaces that fall silent and the structures that outlive their creators. Today, the ruins of El Paraiso stand as both evidence and enigma, a testament to human ingenuity and a reminder of how much remains unknown about our distant past. The wind moves through its corridors, the sun casts long shadows across its walls, and beneath the surface, countless stories remain buried, waiting to be uncovered or perhaps forever lost. In the absence of definitive explanations, the site invites us to imagine, to question, and to reconsider the nature of civilization itself. Was El Paraiso a sacred center, a social experiment, or something entirely different from the categories we use to understand the past? And more importantly, what does its silent abandonment tell us about the fragility of human systems, about the ways in which even the most ambitious creations can be set aside, not with violence or collapse, but with a quiet and deliberate step into the unknown? What do you think truly caused El Paraiso to be abandoned? Climate change, a shift in beliefs, or something we still cannot understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Druin Hunebed complex, located in the quiet province of Drenthe in the Netherlands, stands as one of the most compelling and enigmatic remnants of Europe's prehistoric past, a place where massive stones silently preserve the memory of a civilization that left behind no written language, yet demonstrated a level of capability that continues to challenge modern assumptions. Dating back more than 5,000 years, these structures were built by the funnel beaker culture, a Neolithic society that transformed the landscape with monuments that appear deceptively simple at first glance, but reveal extraordinary complexity upon closer examination. Spread across a gentle terrain, near the Hunebed of Arowane, particularly structures such as D19 and D20, form a concentrated cluster that suggests not just isolated burial activity, but a location of sustained cultural and possibly spiritual importance. The enduring presence of these megalithic tombs raises profound questions, not only about their purpose, but more significantly, about the methods by which they were constructed, methods that seem almost impossible given the technological constraints of the time. What makes the Arowane Hunebed complex truly astonishing is the engineering achievement embodied in its construction, an achievement that appears to defy the limits of what Neolithic communities should have been capable of accomplishing. The structures are composed of enormous glacial boulders, some weighing over 20 tons, stones that were not shaped through quarrying in the conventional sense, but instead selected from those left behind by retreating glaciers at the end of the last ice age. This alone introduces a layer of complexity. These ancient builders had to identify suitable stones scattered across the landscape, evaluate their size, weight, and structural potential, and then devise a method to transport them to a chosen site, often across uneven terrain, and without the benefit of wheels, metal tools, or domesticated draft animals capable of heavy hauling on the scale required. The logistics of such an operation are staggering, and yet the results are undeniable, standing in silent testimony to a process that has never been fully understood. The prevailing theories suggest that wooden rollers, sledges, ropes, and coordinated human labor may have played a role in moving these stones, possibly combined with the strategic use of wet clay or animal fat to reduce friction. But even these explanations feel incomplete when confronted with the sheer precision and consistency evident in the final structures. Transporting massive stones is one challenge. Positioning them with accuracy is another entirely. The upright stones that form the walls of the burial chambers are carefully spaced and aligned, creating stable frameworks capable of supporting the immense weight of the capstones above. These capstones, some of the heaviest elements in the entire structure, had to be lifted and placed atop the supports, a process that would have required not only brute strength, but also an advanced understanding of leverage, balance, and weight distribution. Without cranes or pulleys in the modern sense, the builders likely relied on earthen ramps, gradually raising the stones into position. Yet even this method leaves unanswered questions about control, safety, and the coordination required to prevent collapse during construction. The precision with which these stones were arranged suggests that the builders possessed a practical knowledge of engineering principles that was far more sophisticated than traditionally attributed to Neolithic societies. The chambers are not random piles of rock. They are deliberate constructions with consistent orientations, proportional spacing, and a structural integrity that has allowed them to endure for millennia. Unlike later architectural traditions that depended on binding materials such as mortar, the Hunebed rely entirely on the careful placement and weight of the stones themselves, a technique that paradoxically may contribute to their longevity. By allowing the structure to breathe and shift slightly with environmental changes rather than resisting them rigidly, the builders may have inadvertently created a form of construction that is both flexible and resilient, capable of withstanding thousands of years of natural forces. This raises an even deeper and more intriguing question. How did a society without written knowledge systems develop and transmit such complex construction techniques? The answer likely lies in a combination of observation, experimentation, and oral tradition passed down through generations and refined over time. The scale of the Drowan Hunebed complex suggests that these were not isolated experiments, but the result of accumulated knowledge applied with consistency across multiple structures. Such an undertaking would have required not only technical skill, but also a high degree of social organization, with coordinated labor forces, leadership structures, and shared cultural motivations strong enough to justify the immense investment of time and energy. These were not merely functional constructions. They were acts of collective effort that reflect a community bound by common beliefs, possibly related to death, ancestry, and the afterlife. Beyond the engineering, the purpose of the Hunebeden adds another layer of mystery. While they are widely interpreted as burial sites, this evidence suggests that they were used repeatedly over long periods, indicating that they held ongoing significance within the community. The presence of grave goods, including pottery, tools, and ornaments, points to ritual practices and symbolic meanings that are only partially understood. These structures may have served as focal points for ceremonies, places where the living interacted with the memory of the dead, reinforcing social bonds and cultural identity. The repeated use of the same sites suggests a continuity of tradition, a recognition of these spaces as sacred or significant in ways that extend beyond simple burial. Some researchers have also explored the possibility that the orientation of certain Hunebeden reflects an awareness of celestial patterns, and with entrances aligned toward the rising or setting sun at specific times of the year. While this idea remains debated, it introduces the possibility that these structures were designed to connect the earth with the sky, embedding cosmological meaning into their physical form. Whether intentional or coincidental, such alignments add yet another dimension to the complexity of these monuments. Excavations at the Drowan Hunebed complex have uncovered artifacts that provide glimpses into the lives of its builders, yet these discoveries often deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Disturbed remains, rearranged bones, and variations in structure suggest that the site evolved over time, reflecting changes in cultural practices or external influences that are no longer fully traceable, or each new finding adds another fragment to the puzzle. But the overall picture remains incomplete, a testament to how much has been lost to time. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the Drowan Hunebeden is their endurance. For over 5,000 years, they have withstood environmental changes, erosion, and human interference, remaining largely intact despite the absence of modern construction techniques. This durability challenges contemporary assumptions about what constitutes advanced engineering, suggesting that the solutions developed by these ancient builders were not only effective, but in some ways superior in their ability to adapt to natural conditions over long periods. In the end, the Drowan Hunebed complex is far more than a collection of ancient stones, and it is a profound reminder that human ingenuity did not begin with modern technology. It existed long before, expressed through methods that we are still struggling to fully comprehend. The construction of these monuments, particularly the seemingly impossible feat of moving and assembling massive stones with limited tools, forces us to reconsider the capabilities of prehistoric societies and to acknowledge that their understanding of the physical world may have been deeper and more practical than we often assume. Standing among these stones today, one is not just observing the past, but confronting a question that has yet to be answered. How did they do it? And what else did they know that we have since forgotten? What do you think ancient people actually used to move and assemble these massive stones? Or is there a technique that we still haven't discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden deep within the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Sahara Desert, Arowane stands as one of the most haunting and enigmatic settlements in West Africa. Located far north of Timbuktu in modern-day Mali, this remote outpost once played a crucial role in the trans-Saharan trade network, serving as a lifeline for caravans crossing one of the harshest environments on Earth. Today, however, Arowane exists in a strange liminal state. Neither fully alive nor completely abandoned, its structures slowly surrendering to the encroaching sands. Yet among all its mysteries, one stands out with particular intensity. How have its fragile-looking mud brick structures endured for centuries in such an extreme and hostile environment? To understand Arowane is to first confront its improbability. This is not a place where cities are meant to thrive. The region is defined by extreme aridity, with almost no reliable sources of fresh water, relentless sandstorms, and temperatures that can soar beyond 45 degrees Celsius. Vegetation is nearly non-existent, and the landscape offers little in the way of natural resources. And yet, against all logic, Arowane emerged as a vital node in a vast network of trade routes connecting North Africa with sub-Saharan regions. Caravans laden with salt, gold, textiles, and other goods would pass through this isolated settlement, relying on it as a critical stopover point before venturing deeper into the desert. But Arowane was never a city in the traditional sense. It did not flourish because of fertile land, rivers, or abundant resources. Instead, it existed because of movement, because of the constant flow of caravans that brought with them not only goods, but also water, food, and life itself. Without these caravans, Arowane would have been uninhabitable. This makes its very existence deeply unusual. It was a settlement, sustained not by its environment, but in spite of it. Amid this improbable setting, the architecture of Arowane presents one of its most compelling mysteries. The buildings are constructed almost entirely from mud brick, simple materials made from a mixture of earth, water, and sometimes straw, shaped into blocks and dried under the sun. There is no stone readily available in the region, and wood is extremely scarce, making these earthen materials the only viable option for construction. At first glance, such structures appear fragile, temporary, uninvulnerable. One might expect them to crumble within a few years under the relentless assault of wind and sand. And yet, many of these buildings have endured for generations. This paradox lies at the heart of Arowane's architectural mystery. How can structures made from such humble and seemingly impermanent materials survive in one of the harshest climates on Earth? The answer is not entirely clear, but several factors offer clues, though none fully resolve the enigma. First, the very climate that seems so destructive may also play a role in preservation. The extreme dryness of the Sahara means that there is very little rainfall to erode the mud brick. In more humid environments, earthen structures quickly deteriorate as water seeps into the material, causing it to weaken and collapse. In Arowane, however, rain is so rare that this form of erosion is minimal. The buildings are instead subjected primarily to wind and sand, which, while abrasive, may act more slowly than water in degrading the material. Second, the construction techniques themselves may be more sophisticated than they appear. Traditional builders in the region have long possessed a deep understanding of local materials and environmental conditions. The composition of the mud brick, its precise mixture of clay, sand, and organic fibers, can significantly influence its durability. Some mixtures may harden to a surprising degree, forming a material that is far more resilient than ordinary dried mud. Additionally, the thickness of the walls, often quite substantial, provides structural stability and insulation against temperature extremes. The design of the buildings also reflects an adaptation to the desert environment. Structures are typically low and compact, minimizing their exposure to wind. Openings such as doors and windows are small, reducing the amount of sand that can enter and limiting structural weak points. In some cases, the outer surfaces of walls may become naturally compacted and hardened over time as fine particles are driven into them by the wind, creating a kind of protective crust. Yet even with these explanations, the endurance of Arowane's architecture remains remarkable. Many of these buildings have stood for decades, even centuries, with little to no maintenance. In a place where human presence is minimal and resources are scarce, regular repairs would be difficult, if not impossible. And still, the structures persist, silent witnesses to a past that has largely faded from memory. This raises the possibility that there may be lost knowledge embedded in these construction techniques, methods and practices passed down through generations but never formally documented. As Arowane declines and its population dwindles, this knowledge risks disappearing as well. What we see today may be only a fragment of a once more extensive and sophisticated tradition of earthen architecture, one that was perfectly adapted to its environment but is now slipping into obscurity. Beyond the mystery of its construction, the gradual disappearance of Arowane adds another layer of intrigue. Unlike cities that are destroyed by war, natural disasters, or sudden collapse, Arowane is fading slowly, almost imperceptibly. Thus, as trade routes shifted and maritime commerce replaced the trans-Saharan caravans, the settlement lost its purpose. Without the steady flow of caravans, there was no longer a reason for people to remain. One by one, families left, buildings were abandoned, and the desert began to reclaim the land. Sand encroaches on the structures, burying them piece by piece. Walls erode, roofs collapse, and entire sections of the settlement vanish beneath dunes. It is entirely possible that much of Arowane now lies hidden beneath the sands, waiting to be rediscovered. What remains visible today may be only a small portion of what once existed. And yet, Arowane is not entirely dead. A handful of inhabitants still live there, maintaining a tenuous connection to the past. Occasionally, caravans still pass through, echoing the ancient rhythms that once sustained the settlement. In this sense, Arowane exists as a kind of living relic, a place where history has not been fully erased, but continues to linger in a fragile and uncertain state. Ultimately, the mystery of Arowane is not just about its location, its history, or even its role in trade. It is about resilience, about how something so seemingly fragile can endure in the face of overwhelming adversity. The mud brick structures of Arowane challenge our assumptions about permanence and strength. They remind us that durability is not always a matter of hardness or mass, but of harmony with the environment. In the end, Arowane stands as a quiet testament to human ingenuity and adaptation. It is a place where the line between survival and disappearance is constantly shifting, and where the past is slowly being swallowed by the desert, and where the secrets of ancient construction techniques may be buried alongside the ruins themselves. Whether Arowane was ever larger or more significant than we currently understand remains an open question. But what is certain is that its enduring earthen architecture continues to pose a profound and fascinating mystery, one that invites us to look deeper, to question more, and to reconsider what it truly means for something to last. What do you think allowed the seemingly fragile mud brick structures of Arowane to survive for centuries in such a harsh desert environment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the vast cultural landscape of ancient West Africa, few artistic achievements have provoked as much fascination, admiration, and scholarly debate as the Ife naturalistic bronze heads, masterpieces originating from the sacred city of Ife. These remarkable sculptures, dating roughly from the 12th to the 15th centuries, stand as some of the most technically sophisticated and visually compelling works of art from the pre-modern world. At first glance, what strikes observers most powerfully is their astonishing realism. Unlike many ancient sculptural traditions that favored stylization, abstraction, or symbolic exaggeration, the Ife heads exhibit a level of anatomical precision and lifelike presence that seems almost anachronistic. The proportions of the face are balanced with mathematical subtlety. Yes, the lips are delicately shaped, the eyes convey a quiet intensity, and the contours of the cheeks and jawline reflect a deep understanding of human form. Fine linear markings run vertically across many of the faces, believed to represent scarification patterns or possibly ritual identifiers, yet their exact meaning remains debated. These lines are not merely decorative, they are executed with such consistency and control that they suggest a cultural system of identity encoded into the very surface of the human body. However, beyond their visual impact lies an even deeper and more perplexing mystery, one that centers on the extraordinary metallurgical expertise required to create them. The Ife heads were produced using the lost wax casting technique, a process known for its complexity and demanding precision. In this method, an artist first sculpts the desired form in wax, encases it in a clay mold, and then heats the mold so the wax melts away, leaving a cavity into which molten metal is poured. Once cooled, the mold is broken to reveal the final piece, making each casting unique and impossible to replicate exactly. While this technique was known in various parts of the ancient world, the level of refinement seen in the Ife heads is nothing short of astonishing. The metal, primarily brass, an alloy of copper and zinc, was cast into thin, hollow forms with walls of remarkably consistent thickness. This uniformity is particularly difficult to achieve, even with modern tools, as it requires precise control over temperature, timing, and material composition. What makes this even more extraordinary is the near-total absence of visible casting flaws, and in most ancient metalworks, one can detect imperfections, air bubbles, uneven surfaces, signs of repair, or distortions caused by cooling. Yet the Ife heads appear almost flawless. Their surfaces are smooth, their details crisp, and their structural integrity intact. There is little to no evidence of post-casting correction, suggesting that the artisans achieved an exceptional level of accuracy during the initial casting process itself. This raises profound questions about the technological capabilities of the society that produced them. How did these craftsmen manage to control furnace temperatures with such precision? What kind of fuel sources and airflow systems did they use to reach and maintain the necessary heat levels? How did they formulate alloys with such consistency? Especially given the challenges of sourcing and refining raw materials in the pre-industrial era. Equally puzzling is the lack of direct archaeological evidence for large-scale metallurgical infrastructure in Ife that would correspond to such advanced production. While traces of metalworking have been found, they do not fully explain the sophistication implied by the finished works. There are no clearly identified industrial workshops, no extensive remains of high-capacity furnaces, and no detailed records of the processes involved. This absence has led some scholars to speculate that the knowledge may have been closely guarded, possibly restricted to specialized guilds or ritual practitioners whose techniques were transmitted orally and deliberately concealed. And others suggest that the apparent gap in evidence may be due to preservation issues, with organic materials and less durable structures having simply disappeared over time. Still, the question lingers: was this knowledge developed independently within IFE, or did it emerge through contact with other advanced metallurgical traditions now lost to history? The mystery deepens when one considers the broader cultural and symbolic context of these heads. Many of them feature small perforations around the hairline or crown area, indicating that additional elements, perhaps beaded crowns, elaborate headdresses, or organic adornments, were once attached. This strongly suggests that the heads were not standalone artworks, but components of more complex ritual or ceremonial assemblages. In Yoruba belief systems, the head, and Ori, holds profound spiritual significance, representing not only physical identity, but also destiny, consciousness, and divine connection. It is therefore plausible that these sculptures were created to embody or honor sacred individuals such as kings, uni, ancestors, or deified figures. Yet, in the absence of inscriptions or written documentation, the exact identities of those depicted remain unknown, leaving us with faces that feel deeply personal yet fundamentally anonymous. Adding another layer to the enigma is the seemingly abrupt emergence of this high level of artistic and technological sophistication. Earlier cultures in the region, such as Nok, are known for their terracotta sculptures, which, while impressive in their own right, differ significantly in style and technique from the IFE bronzes. The transition from these earlier forms to the refined naturalism and advanced metallurgy of IFE does not appear to follow a clear, gradual evolutionary path. Instead, it seems as though a fully developed tradition materialized with little warning, as if the knowledge had been cultivated elsewhere or preserved in a form that has not survived in the archaeological record. This discontinuity challenges conventional models of technological and artistic development, which typically assume incremental progress over time. Ultimately, the IFE naturalistic bronze heads stand at the intersection of art, technology, and spirituality, embodying a level of mastery that continues to defy easy explanation. They are not merely artifacts of a distant past, but enduring testaments to human ingenuity and cultural depth. Their lifelike faces invite us to connect with individuals who lived centuries ago, while their flawless construction compels us to reconsider what we believe ancient societies were capable of achieving. The more closely we examine them, the more they seem to resist complete understanding, preserving within their silent expressions a series of unanswered questions. How did a society, operating without modern tools or written technical manuals, achieve such perfection in metal? What systems of knowledge, belief, and practice made this possible? And perhaps most intriguingly, how much of that knowledge has been lost, waiting to be rediscovered, or remaining forever beyond our reach? Do you think the IFE heads are evidence of lost knowledge, or proof that ancient humans reached a level of mastery far beyond what we once believed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Anyang oracle bone divination stands as one of the most extraordinary windows into the ancient human mind, a system where spirituality, politics, and early writing converged into a single ritual practice that shaped the fate of an entire civilization. Emerging during the late Shang dynasty around the 13th century BCE in the ancient capital of Anyang, this practice was not merely a form of superstition or primitive belief. Instead, it functioned as a structured, almost bureaucratic system of communication between the living and the divine, carried out on the hardened surfaces of ox scapulae and turtle plastrons. These objects, once part of living creatures, were transformed into sacred mediums through which kings sought guidance from ancestral spirits and unseen forces believed to govern the world. At the archaeological site of Yinshu, thousands of these oracle bones have been uncovered, each bearing inscriptions that reveal a civilization deeply concerned with order, prediction, and control. The process itself was both methodical and mysterious. Artisans would carefully prepare the bones by drilling small hollows into their surfaces. Then, under the authority of the king or a designated diviner, heat would be applied using a metal rod until the bone cracked with a sharp, sudden sound. These cracks, seemingly random and chaotic, were interpreted as answers from the spiritual realm. Questions inscribed beforehand ranged from the mundane, harvest outcomes, weather patterns, to matters of life and death, including warfare, royal childbirth, and sacrificial rituals. Yet what elevates this practice beyond mere ritual is the presence of writing. The inscriptions carved into these bones represent the earliest known form of Chinese script, often referred to as oracle bone script. These characters are not simplistic symbols, but rather a surprisingly sophisticated system, capable of expressing complex ideas, names, dates, and outcomes. In many cases, the inscriptions include not only the initial question, but also the interpretation, and sometimes a later verification of whether the prediction proved accurate. This creates a remarkable feedback loop, suggesting that the Shang elite were not blindly following omens, but actively recording and perhaps evaluating the reliability of their divination practices. The central figure in this system was often the king himself, such as Wu Ding, who acted as both political ruler and spiritual intermediary. In this dual role, the king's authority was reinforced by his perceived ability to communicate with ancestors and deities. Every major decision, whether to wage war, conduct a sacrifice, or initiate construction, was validated through oracle bone divination. In this sense, the practice was not separate from governance. It was governance. The cracks in the bone were effectively the voice of divine approval or warning, shaping the trajectory of the Shang state. Yet, for all its sophistication and central importance, the system of oracle bone divination presents one of the most profound mysteries in ancient history: its disappearance. When the Shang dynasty fell and was replaced by the Zhou dynasty, this elaborate practice did not evolve or expand. It faded. Over time, it was largely abandoned, replaced by other forms of divination, most notably those associated with the I Ching, or Book of Changes. This transition raises a series of unsettling and unresolved questions. How could a system so deeply embedded in the political and spiritual fabric of a civilization simply vanish? Why would a method that had guided kings and recorded history for generations be set aside? One possible explanation lies in the political upheaval that accompanied the fall of the Shang. Oracle bone divination was not a neutral practice. It was intimately tied to the authority and legitimacy of the Shang kings. The rituals, the inscriptions, and even the interpretation of the cracks were controlled by the royal court. When the Zhou overthrew the Shang, and they may have deliberately distanced themselves from these practices to undermine the ideological foundations of their predecessors. By abandoning oracle bone divination, the Zhou could establish a new system of belief, one that redefined the relationship between heaven, ruler, and people. In this context, the disappearance of oracle bones may have been less about inefficiency and more about political strategy. Another possibility is that the practice was gradually replaced by more abstract and flexible systems of divination. The oracle bone method relied on physical materials, specialized preparation, and a highly controlled ritual environment. In contrast, later systems like the I Ching used symbolic hexagrams derived from simpler processes, such as casting yarrow stalks or coins. These methods may have been more adaptable, or accessible, and philosophically aligned with the evolving worldview of the Zhou period. If so, the decline of oracle bones could reflect a broader shift from concrete, ritual-based communication with the divine to a more conceptual and interpretive approach. However, neither explanation fully resolves the mystery. Archaeological evidence does not show a smooth transition, but rather a relatively abrupt decline in the use of oracle bones. This suggests that something more decisive may have occurred, perhaps a combination of political suppression, cultural transformation, and the loss of specialized knowledge required to produce and interpret the bones. It is also possible that the practice continued in less visible forms, leaving behind little trace for modern archaeologists to uncover. But compounding this mystery is the fact that oracle bone script itself did not disappear. Instead, it evolved, eventually giving rise to the Chinese writing system used for millennia. This creates a striking contrast. The medium and method of divination vanished, but the language it helped preserve endured and flourished. It is as if the spiritual framework collapsed, while the intellectual structure remained, detached from its original purpose. The rediscovery of these bones in the late 19th century adds another layer of intrigue. For centuries, they were treated as dragon bones and ground into powder for traditional medicine, their inscriptions ignored or unnoticed. It was only when scholars like Wang Yirong recognized the significance of the carvings that the true importance of these artifacts came to light. That this accidental preservation and delayed recognition raise an unsettling possibility. How much knowledge has been lost simply because it was not recognized in time? Today, Anyang oracle bone divination stands at the intersection of history, archaeology, linguistics, and mystery. It challenges modern assumptions about ancient societies, revealing a level of complexity and organization that defies the notion of early civilizations as primitive or unsophisticated. At the same time, its sudden disappearance serves as a reminder that even the most established systems can vanish, leaving behind only fragments and questions. In the end, the cracks in those ancient bones may no longer be read as messages from the divine, but they continue to speak in another way. They tell a story of a civilization that sought certainty in an uncertain world, that recorded its fears and hopes in the language of fire and fracture. And perhaps most intriguingly, they leave us with a question that remains unanswered. Did the system disappear because it failed, because it was replaced, or because its true meaning has been lost to time? What do you think? Why did oracle bone divination disappear? Because it became outdated, was replaced, or is there still a hidden secret yet to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the arid hills of southeastern Spain, the Fuente Alamo stands as one of the most intriguing and underappreciated archaeological sites of prehistoric Europe. Belonging to the enigmatic El Agar culture, which flourished between roughly 2200 and 1550 BCE, this settlement reveals a society that was far more complex, organized, and technologically advanced than once believed. At first glance, Fuente Alamo may appear to be just another ancient hillside ruin, but beneath its layered terraces and stone walls lies a narrative of innovation, hierarchy, and mystery that continues to challenge modern understanding. The settlement itself is ingeniously constructed along a steep slope, with houses arranged in terraced formations that seem almost engineered with modern precision. These structures were built using carefully fitted stones, forming durable walls that have endured for millennia without the use of mortar. The layout suggests not only a keen understanding of architecture and environmental adaptation, but also a centralized planning system, an early form of urban organization that hints at a structured and possibly hierarchical society. Narrow pathways and controlled access points further imply that the settlement was designed with both efficiency and defense in mind, reinforcing the idea that Fuente Alamo may have functioned as both a residential center and a strategic stronghold. Yet one of the most striking aspects of life at Fuente Alamo lies not in its architecture, but beneath it. The inhabitants practiced the unusual custom of burying their dead directly beneath the floors of their homes. These burials, often placed in ceramic jars or simple pits, were sometimes accompanied by grave goods such as weapons, ornaments, and tools. The variation in these offerings reveals a clear social stratification. Some individuals were interred with elaborate items, while others were buried with little to nothing. This stark contrast suggests the presence of a rigid class system, possibly governed by elites who controlled both resources and labor. It also raises profound questions about belief systems. Did the living see themselves as coexisting with their ancestors, or were these burials a symbolic claim over property and lineage? However, the most compelling and mysterious feature of Fuente Alamo, and indeed of the entire El Argar culture, is its unexpectedly advanced metallurgical technology. In an era when much of Europe was still transitioning from stone to metal, the inhabitants of this settlement demonstrated a remarkable mastery of bronze production that appears far ahead of its time. Archaeological evidence indicates that they were not merely using metal, but actively producing it with a level of consistency and sophistication that implies specialized knowledge and possibly even controlled production systems. Tools and weapons recovered from the site, such as daggers, halberds, and axes, exhibit uniform shapes and high-quality casting, suggesting that metallurgical processes were standardized rather than experimental. This level of consistency hints at the existence of skilled craftsmen or metallurgical specialists who understood not only how to smelt copper and alloy it with tin, but also how to refine and shape the resulting bronze with precision. The control of temperature, material ratios, and casting techniques required for such production would have demanded both experience and an empirical understanding of metallurgical principles, knowledge that is difficult to reconcile with the technological limitations traditionally associated with the Bronze Age. Even more intriguing is the question of resource acquisition. The production of bronze requires both copper and tin, yet tin deposits are relatively scarce and often located far from copper sources. This suggests that the people of Fuente Alamo were either part of a broader trade network or had developed logistical systems to obtain and transport these materials over considerable distances. If true, this would position the settlement not as an isolated community, but as a node within a larger economic and cultural network, one capable of sustaining specialized industries and long-distance exchange. Some researchers have proposed that this metallurgical sophistication may have been a key factor in the social hierarchy observed at the site. Control over metal production would have conferred significant power, allowing elites to monopolize weaponry, tools, and symbols of status. In this sense, metallurgy was not just a technological achievement, but a foundation for political and economic dominance. The presence of high-status burials containing finely crafted metal objects further supports this theory, suggesting that metal was both a practical resource and a marker of identity and authority. Yet, despite these advancements, the origins of this metallurgical knowledge remain deeply uncertain. Did the inhabitants of Fuente Alamo develop these techniques independently through gradual experimentation and innovation, or were they influenced by external cultures, perhaps through contact with more technologically advanced societies in the Eastern Mediterranean? The lack of clear transitional stages in the archaeological record makes it difficult to trace a linear progression, leading some to speculate that the knowledge may have appeared relatively suddenly, an anomaly that challenges conventional models of technological evolution. Equally puzzling is the eventual decline of the El Argar culture. Around 1550 BCE, settlements like Fuente Alamo were abruptly abandoned or transformed, and the sophisticated systems that had sustained them disappeared. There is no definitive evidence of widespread warfare, nor clear signs of catastrophic natural disasters. Some theories point to environmental stress, such as prolonged drought or soil depletion, which may have undermined agricultural productivity. Others suggest internal social tensions, perhaps exacerbated by rigid hierarchies and unequal resource distribution. It is also possible that disruptions in trade networks, particularly those supplying tin, could have crippled the metallurgical industry that formed the backbone of the society. Whatever the cause, the disappearance of Fuente Alamo and its culture remains one of the most compelling mysteries of prehistoric Europe. It represents not just the fall of a settlement, but the vanishing of a system that had achieved a remarkable balance of technological innovation, social organization, and environmental adaptation. Today, the ruins stand silent, their stones still aligned with the same precision as they were thousands of years ago, their secrets buried beneath layers of earth and time. In the end, Fuente Alamo forces us to reconsider what we think we know about the Bronze Age. It challenges the notion of linear progress and reminds us that advanced knowledge and complex societies can emerge and disappear far from the centers of history we typically recognize. Most of all, it leaves us with a haunting question. How could a civilization capable of such metallurgical mastery, architectural ingenuity, and social organization simply fade into obscurity, leaving behind only fragments of its once extraordinary existence? What do you think truly caused the civilization at Fuente Alamo to mysteriously disappear like that? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the arid northern coast of ancient Peru, long before the rise of more widely recognized Andean civilizations, the Cupisnique culture developed a visual language that remains as enigmatic as it is sophisticated. Known today primarily through their ceramics and iconography, the Cupisnique left behind no written records, no decipherable inscriptions, and no clear explanation of their beliefs. Yet through their art, they communicated a worldview rich in symbolism, transformation, and ritual significance. The origins of Cupisnique iconography are therefore not just an artistic question, but a window into one of the earliest complex spiritual systems in the Andes, a system that appears both highly structured and deeply mysterious. At the core of Cupisnique iconography lies a recurring fascination with hybrid beings, figures that merge human and animal characteristics into a single, often unsettling form. These entities frequently display human-like bodies adorned with the fangs of jaguars, the coiling forms of serpents, or the piercing eyes and beaks of predatory birds. Such imagery suggests a belief system in which boundaries between species were fluid rather than fixed. Rather than depicting animals or humans separately, Cupisnique artists seem to have been concerned with transformation itself, the process by which one state of being could shift into another. This aligns closely with shamanic traditions observed in later Andean cultures, in where spiritual practitioners were believed to enter altered states of consciousness and assume the attributes of powerful animals. Whether these images represent deities, mythological beings, or human figures in trance remains unknown, but their consistency across artifacts suggests a shared symbolic language understood by the people who created them. Equally intriguing is the striking resemblance between Cupisnique imagery and that of the later Chavin culture, particularly the presence of the so-called fanged deity. This motif, characterized by exaggerated teeth, wide eyes, and often serpentine elements, appears in both traditions with remarkable similarity. The question of influence, however, remains unresolved. Some scholars argue that Cupisnique iconography predates and possibly inspired Chavin religious art, while others suggest that both cultures drew from an even older, now lost symbolic tradition that spread across the Andean region. The absence of clear chronological and cultural boundaries only deepens the mystery, hinting at the possibility of a shared ideological network that existed long before centralized civilizations emerged. Yet perhaps the most extraordinary and least understood aspect of Cupisnique culture lies not only in what they depicted, but in how they created it, most notably their production of black polished ceramics. These vessels, often featuring the iconic stirrup spout design, are among the most technically impressive artifacts of the ancient Andes. Their surfaces possess a deep, mirror-like sheen, so smooth and reflective that they appear almost metallic rather than ceramic. This finish is not merely decorative, it is integral to the visual and symbolic impact of the objects. Light glides across their curved surfaces, accentuating the contours of carved faces, fangs, and swirling motifs, bringing the imagery to life in a way that flat or matte surfaces could not achieve. The mystery begins with the technique itself. Despite extensive archaeological study, the exact methods used by Cupisnique artisans to achieve this distinctive black polish are not fully understood. It is widely believed that they employed a form of reduction firing, a process in which oxygen is limited within the kiln, causing chemical changes in the clay that result in a darkened color. However, successfully controlling such an environment requires a high degree of precision and consistency. Even slight variations in temperature or airflow can lead to uneven results. Yet Cupisnique ceramics display a remarkable uniformity in both color and finish. This suggests not only technical expertise, but also a deep empirical understanding of materials and firing conditions developed long before the advent of written technical knowledge. Moreover, the polishing itself appears to have been carried out with extraordinary care. The surfaces were likely burnished using smooth stones or tools before firing, compressing the clay particles to create a dense, reflective finish. Achieving such a level of smoothness across complex, curved forms, especially those incorporating intricate relief designs, would have required both time and skill on a scale that challenges modern assumptions about early craft production. These were not crude or experimental objects. They were the result of a refined and possibly specialized tradition passed down through generations. What makes this even more compelling is the integration of technique and symbolism. The glossy black surface may have held ritual significance beyond its aesthetic appeal. In many cultures, reflective surfaces are associated with the supernatural, serving as portals, mirrors of the soul, or mediums through which the unseen world can be perceived. The dark, almost obsidian-like appearance of Cupisnique ceramics could have been intended to evoke such associations, enhancing their role in ceremonial contexts. When combined with the depiction of hybrid beings and transformative imagery, these vessels may have functioned not just as containers, but as active participants in ritual experiences, objects designed to mediate between the human and the divine. Further supporting this interpretation is the possibility that Cupisnique iconography was influenced by altered states of consciousness. Some artifacts suggest the use of hallucinogenic substances, such as the San Pedro cactus, which has a long history of ritual use in the Andes. The distorted features, exaggerated expressions, and dynamic patterns seen in Cupisnique art bear a resemblance to visual phenomena reported in trance states. If such experiences played a role in shaping their symbolic system, then the ceramics themselves may represent attempts to capture and communicate visions that transcended ordinary perception. The reflective black surfaces would have amplified this effect, and interacting with light and shadow to create a sense of movement and transformation. Despite these insights, the origins of Cupisnique iconography remain fundamentally elusive. Without written records, modern interpretations rely on comparison, inference, and the careful analysis of material evidence. Each artifact offers clues, but no definitive answers. The recurring motifs, the technical mastery, and the apparent connections to broader Andean traditions all point to a complex and deeply rooted cultural system, one that developed independently yet resonates with themes found across ancient civilizations worldwide. In the end, the true significance of Cupisnique iconography may lie in its ability to resist complete understanding. It challenges researchers to look beyond conventional categories of art, religion, and technology, and to consider the possibility that early societies possessed forms of knowledge and expression that do not fit neatly into modern frameworks. The black polished ceramics in particular stand as a testament to this complexity. Objects that are at once beautiful, functional, and profoundly mysterious. They remind us that even in the absence of written language, human creativity has always found ways to encode meaning, to explore the boundaries of perception, and to leave behind traces of worlds that we are only beginning to comprehend. Do you think the black, polished ceramic techniques of the Cupisnique were the result of knowledge accumulated over generations, or did they possess a kind of knowledge that has since been lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Etowah Temple, rising above the landscape of what is now known as the Etowah Indian Mounds, stands as one of the most compelling and enigmatic ceremonial centers of prehistoric North America. At its height, between approximately 1000 and 1550 CE, Etowah was not merely a settlement, but a powerful hub of political authority, spiritual ritual, and long-distance exchange within the Mississippian cultural world. Dominating the site are massive earthen platform mounds, especially the towering Mound A, upon which the so-called temple once stood. Elevated physically above the surrounding village, this sacred structure symbolized more than architecture. It represented a worldview in which hierarchy, cosmology, and power were inseparably intertwined. From this elevated position, the elites and religious leaders likely conducted rituals that connected the earthly realm to the spiritual cosmos, reinforcing their authority over the people below. Yet while the scale and engineering of these earthen constructions are impressive, the true mystery of Etowah lies not only in its architecture, but in the extraordinary ritual artifacts discovered within its grounds, objects that reveal a level of artistic sophistication and symbolic complexity that challenges conventional assumptions about pre-Columbian societies in North America. Among the most striking discoveries at Etowah are the finely crafted ceremonial objects, buried within elite graves and ritual contexts. These include intricately engraved copper plates, delicately carved shell ornaments, stone effigy pipes, and elaborately decorated ceremonial axes. The copper plates, in particular, stand out as masterpieces of ancient artistry. Hammered from native copper and then engraved with astonishing precision, these plates often depict stylized human figures, frequently interpreted as warriors, dancers, or mythological beings, adorned with elaborate headdresses, wings, and symbolic regalia. The level of detail in these engravings is remarkable. Muscles are rendered with careful lines, garments are decorated with repeating motifs, and facial expressions convey a sense of motion and identity. Such craftsmanship suggests not only technical skill, but also a deeply developed symbolic language, one that communicated ideas about status, cosmology, and possibly even mythological narratives. And what makes these objects even more intriguing is the fact that they were created without the use of iron tools or advanced metallurgical technology. The artisans of Etowah worked with native copper using hammering and annealing techniques, yet achieved results that rival the artistic achievements of far more technologically advanced civilizations. Equally fascinating are the shell artifacts, many of which were carved from marine shells originating hundreds of kilometers away along the Gulf Coast. These shells were transformed into gorgets, circular pendants worn on the chest, and engraved with intricate designs that echo the imagery found on the copper plates. Spirals, cross motifs, and stylized figures appear repeatedly, hinting at a shared iconographic system across the Mississippian world. The presence of marine shell in an inland site like Etowah points to an extensive trade network, one that connected distant regions and facilitated not only the exchange of materials, but also the transmission of artistic styles and religious ideas. The artisans who worked these shells demonstrated extraordinary precision, carving fine lines into a brittle material without modern tools, achieving symmetry and detail that required both patience and mastery. These objects were not merely decorative, they were imbued with meaning, likely serving as markers of identity, rank, and spiritual affiliation. Stone effigy pipes and ceremonial weapons further enrich the picture of Etowah's ritual life. Effigy pipes carved into the shapes of animals or human figures suggest the importance of ritual smoking in ceremonial contexts, possibly as a means of communication with the spiritual world. Ceremonial axes, often too delicate for practical use, were likely symbols of authority or instruments used in ritual performances. The materials used, stone, copper, shell, were not chosen at random. Each carried symbolic significance, perhaps representing different realms of the cosmos, the underworld, the earthly plane, and the sky. When combined in burial contexts, these objects formed a kind of symbolic assemblage, a carefully curated set of items intended to accompany the deceased into the afterlife or to signify their role within the community even in death. The sheer sophistication of these artifacts raises profound questions. How did a society without a written language develop such a complex visual system? What knowledge systems underpinned the creation of these objects? And how were they transmitted across generations? The consistency of motifs across different materials and sites suggests the existence of a shared ideological framework, sometimes referred to by archaeologists as the Southeastern Ceremonial Complex. This network of symbols and meanings appears across a wide geographic area, linking Etowah to other major centers such as Cahokia and Moundville. Yet the exact nature of this connection remains elusive. Were these sites part of a loosely connected cultural sphere, or did they share deeper political or religious ties? The artifacts of Etowah, with their recurring imagery and stylistic coherence, hint at a level of cultural integration that is still not fully understood. Another layer of mystery lies in the social context of these objects. Many of the most elaborate artifacts were found in elite burials, suggesting that access to such items was restricted to a privileged class. This implies a society with pronounced social stratification, where power and status were reinforced through the control of sacred objects and participation in ritual practices. The temple atop Mound A likely served as the focal point of these activities, a place where rituals were performed, decisions were made, and authority was displayed. The artifacts, in this sense, were not merely passive objects, but active participants in the construction of social reality. They communicated messages about who held power, how that power was justified, and how the cosmos itself was ordered. Despite decades of archaeological research, many aspects of Etowah remain unresolved. The precise meanings of the symbols engraved on copper and shell are still debated. Some researchers interpret them as representations of mythological narratives, others as markers of clan identity or rank. The techniques used to produce such fine detail without advanced tools continue to fascinate and puzzle scholars. Even the origin of the artistic styles, whether they developed independently at Etowah or were influenced by distant cultures, remains an open question. And perhaps most intriguingly, the society that created these objects eventually declined and disappeared, leaving behind only these silent yet eloquent artifacts as clues to their existence. In the end, Etowah Temple is more than an archaeological site. It is a testament to human creativity, complexity, and mystery. The ritual treasures uncovered there challenge simplistic narratives about technological progress and cultural development, revealing a society capable of producing art and symbolism of extraordinary depth without the tools or systems we often associate with such achievements. The copper plates, shell gorgets, and carved effigies are not just remnants of the past. They are messages from a lost world, inviting us to reconsider what we think we know about ancient civilizations. And as long as their meanings remain only partially understood, the mystery of Etowah will continue to captivate and inspire, standing as a reminder that even in the absence of written records, the human capacity for expression and belief can leave behind a legacy as profound as any monument of stone. Do you think the incredibly refined ritual treasures at Etowah reflect a civilization far more advanced than we assume? Or do they hide an even greater mystery yet to be uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Gunung Padang rises quietly above the lush highlands of West Java, Indonesia, its terraces of dark volcanic stone stretching across the summit like the fragmented memory of something far older than history itself. At first glance, it appears to be a typical megalithic site, rows of upright stone columns arranged into stepped platforms, reminiscent of other ancient ritual landscapes scattered across Southeast Asia. Yet beneath this seemingly familiar surface lies one of the most controversial and enigmatic archaeological puzzles in the world, a site that challenges not only conventional timelines, but also our understanding of how ancient civilizations developed technological capability. Over the past decade, Gunung Padang has transformed from a regional curiosity into a global mystery, and largely due to emerging evidence suggesting that what we see on the surface may only be the uppermost layer of a far deeper, far older, and far more complex structure hidden within the hill itself. Initial investigations revealed that the visible terraces are composed of columnar basalt, naturally formed volcanic rock that fractures into hexagonal pillars. These stones, arranged both vertically and horizontally, form walls, pathways, and platforms with a degree of order that immediately raises questions. While columnar basalt is not unusual in volcanic regions, the way these columns have been selected, transported, and assembled at Gunung Padang suggests deliberate human intervention. The arrangement is not random, nor is it merely functional. It appears to follow patterns, alignments, and structural logic that hint at a sophisticated understanding of materials and design. However, it is when researchers began to look beneath the surface that the true scale of the mystery began to unfold. Using ground-penetrating radar, seismic tomography, and core drilling, scientists detected multiple subsurface layers extending tens of meters below the visible site. These layers appear to consist of different construction phases, each with distinct characteristics. Some are composed of compacted materials, others of arranged stone blocks, and still others of cavities or chambers, whose purposes remain unknown. The deeper the probes reached, the more anomalous the data became. Certain layers exhibited densities and patterns inconsistent with natural geological formations, suggesting the possibility of artificial modification or even construction on a massive scale. If these interpretations are correct, then Gunung Padang may not simply be a megalithic hilltop site, but rather a buried pyramid-like structure built in stages over an immense span of time. It is within this context that the most fascinating and perplexing aspect of Gunung Padang emerges: its construction techniques. The visible stone columns, though derived from natural basalt formations, have been manipulated with surprising precision. Many are cut or positioned in ways that create stable, interlocking arrangements, allowing the terraces to maintain their integrity despite centuries, if not millennia, of environmental stress. The columns are often laid horizontally in tightly packed rows, forming retaining walls that resist erosion, and while others are set upright to create boundaries or ceremonial spaces. The consistency of these arrangements suggests not only intentional design, but also a repeatable construction method, implying knowledge transmission across generations. Even more intriguing is the possibility that similar techniques extend into the subsurface layers. Core samples, extracted from deeper levels, have revealed stone fragments embedded within matrices that appear artificially compacted, almost like a primitive form of concrete or engineered fill. In some cases, these materials show signs of deliberate layering, with finer particles used to stabilize larger fragments, creating a composite structure capable of supporting significant weight. This raises a profound question. Were the builders of Gunung Padang experimenting with early forms of geotechnical engineering? If so, this would represent a level of technological sophistication far beyond what is typically attributed to prehistoric societies. The geometry of the site further complicates the picture. Certain alignments of the terraces and underlying structures appear to follow directional patterns, possibly oriented toward cardinal points or astronomical events. While such alignments are common in later ancient civilizations, their presence at a site that may date back tens of thousands of years would be extraordinary. It suggests not only architectural planning, but also an awareness of spatial orientation and perhaps even symbolic or ritual significance encoded into the very layout of the structure. The repetition of angles, the distribution of mass, and the integration of natural topography all point to a deliberate effort to harmonize construction with the surrounding environment. Yet, despite these compelling observations, the interpretation of Gunung Padang remains fiercely debated. Critics argue that many of the features described as artificial could be explained by natural geological processes, particularly in a volcanically active region where lava flows and cooling patterns can produce complex formations. They caution against overinterpreting limited data and emphasize the need for rigorous, peer-reviewed analysis. Supporters of the artificial construction hypothesis, however, counter that the combination of structural regularity, subsurface anomalies, and a material composition cannot be easily dismissed as natural coincidence. They point to the sheer scale of the detected formations and the apparent layering as evidence of prolonged human activity, possibly spanning multiple cultural phases. If the more radical interpretations are even partially correct, the implications are staggering. A multi-layered, pyramid-like structure buried within Gunung Padang and dating back to the end of the last ice age would suggest that advanced construction knowledge existed far earlier than currently accepted. It would imply that prehistoric societies possessed not only the organizational capacity to undertake large-scale projects, but also the technical understanding to manipulate materials in sophisticated ways. Such a revelation would force a re-evaluation of the timeline of human development, and potentially uncovering a lost chapter of civilization that has left few traces beyond enigmatic sites like this one. For now, Gunung Padang remains an open question, a place where evidence and interpretation exist in uneasy tension. Excavations continue intermittently, often hindered by logistical challenges and scientific disagreement. Each new discovery seems to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it, revealing additional layers, both literal and metaphorical. The hill stands as a silent witness to whatever processes shaped it, whether natural, human, or some combination of both. And at the heart of this mystery lies the enduring puzzle of its construction. How stones were chosen, shaped, and arranged with such apparent intent, and what knowledge guided the hands that placed them there. In the end, the Gunung Padang is more than just an archaeological site. It is a challenge to our assumptions about the past. Its strange and intricate construction techniques invite us to consider possibilities that lie beyond conventional frameworks, to question what we think we know about the capabilities of ancient peoples. Whether it proves to be a misunderstood natural formation or the remnant of an extraordinarily ancient human endeavor, one thing is certain. The secrets of Gunung Padang are far from fully uncovered, and the deeper we look, the more extraordinary they seem to become. Do you think Gunung Padang is an ancient man-made structure, or simply a natural formation that has been misunderstood? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden within the rugged and remote landscapes of the Kimberley region in Western Australia lies one of the most enigmatic artistic traditions in human history, the Wandjina rock art. These ancient paintings, created and preserved by Aboriginal peoples for thousands of years, are not merely decorative expressions, but deeply spiritual representations of powerful ancestral beings. At first glance, the Wandjina figures appear strikingly unusual. Large, rounded heads dominate their forms with oversized black eyes that seem to gaze beyond the physical world. Most unsettling of all is the complete absence of a mouth. This omission is not accidental, but intentional, rooted in profound cultural meaning. According to Aboriginal belief systems, the Wandjina are creator spirits associated with clouds, rain, and the very formation of the land itself. They do not require speech, as their power transcends language. They shape reality through presence, thought, and natural forces rather than words. The visual simplicity of the Wandjina figures contrasts sharply with other nearby rock art traditions, such as the more intricate and dynamic Guion Bradshaw paintings. While Guion figures depict slender, elaborately adorned human-like forms in motion, the Wandjina stand as static, monumental presences. This stark stylistic difference has led researchers to question whether these traditions emerged from entirely separate cultural phases or even distinct groups of people. The transition from one style to the other remains one of the enduring mysteries of Kimberley rock art, suggesting a shift not only in artistic technique but also in worldview and spiritual focus. Yet what truly sets the Wandjina rock art apart is not only its symbolic power or unusual aesthetic, it is the remarkable way in which it has endured. Unlike many ancient artworks that fade into obscurity with time, Wandjina paintings have been continuously maintained and repainted by successive generations of Aboriginal custodians. This living tradition blurs the boundary between past and present, making it nearly impossible to determine the original age of many figures. Layers of pigment may represent centuries, even millennia, of renewal, each application reaffirming the presence and significance of the Wandjina spirits in the contemporary world. Among all the mysteries surrounding these artworks, one of the most compelling lies in their color and material composition. The pigments used in Wandjina paintings, primarily ochres derived from natural earth minerals combined with charcoal and other organic substances, have demonstrated an extraordinary durability that challenges modern expectations. In an environment characterized by intense heat, seasonal rains, and exposure to the elements, these colors have persisted with surprising clarity. Whites remain luminous, blacks retain their depth, and reds continue to radiate a subtle intensity, even after what may be thousands of years. This enduring vibrancy raises important questions about the technical knowledge possessed by the original artists. How were these pigments prepared and applied in such a way that they could withstand the harsh climatic conditions of the Kimberley region? It is possible that the artists had an intimate understanding of local geology and chemistry, selecting specific mineral compositions that offered greater resistance to weathering. The binding agents used to fix the pigments to rock surfaces remain a subject of speculation, as their exact composition has not been fully identified. Some researchers suggest that plant resins, animal fats, or other organic compounds may have been used to enhance adhesion and longevity, but definitive evidence remains elusive. Equally intriguing is the method of application. The Wandjina figures are often painted onto rock surfaces that provide natural shelter, such as cave walls or overhangs, which protect them from direct rainfall and sunlight. However, even with such protection, the level of preservation observed in many sites exceeds what would typically be expected. This suggests that the artists not only understood the properties of their materials, but also carefully selected and prepared surfaces to maximize durability. The possibility that certain preparatory techniques, such as cleaning, smoothing, or even chemically altering the rock surface, were employed cannot be ruled out. The continued practice of repainting further complicates our understanding of the original techniques. Each generation that renews the Wandjina images contributes to their preservation, yet also alters them in subtle ways. This ongoing interaction between human hands and ancient forms creates a dynamic process in which tradition and innovation coexist. The result is a body of work that is simultaneously ancient and contemporary, a visual record of cultural continuity that defies conventional archaeological timelines. Beyond the technical aspects, the enduring colors of the Wandjina paintings carry symbolic significance. In Aboriginal cosmology, the act of repainting is not merely maintenance, but a ritual renewal of spiritual power. The pigments themselves are imbued with meaning, connecting the physical materials of the earth with the ancestral forces they represent. The persistence of these colors over time can thus be seen not only as a testament to human ingenuity, but also as a reflection of the enduring presence of the Wandjina spirits themselves. Modern observers, encountering these vivid images against the ancient stone, often experience a sense of awe and curiosity. Some have drawn speculative parallels between the appearance of the Wandjina figures and contemporary depictions of extraterrestrial beings, noting the large eyes, rounded heads, and simplified features. While such interpretations fall outside the scope of established scholarship, they highlight the profound impact that these images continue to have on the human imagination. The Wandjina challenge our assumptions about ancient art, suggesting that early societies possessed not only technical skill, but also complex symbolic systems that remain only partially understood. Ultimately, the mystery of the Wandjina rock art lies in the intersection of art, spirituality, and science. These paintings are not relics of a vanished past, but living expressions of a culture that continues to honor and reinterpret them. Their unusual forms invite questions about perception and representation. Their enduring pigments provoke inquiries into ancient technology, and their continued significance underscores the resilience of cultural knowledge across generations. In focusing on the colors and techniques that have allowed these images to endure, we are reminded that the achievements of ancient peoples often extend beyond what is immediately visible. The Wandjina rock art stands as a powerful example of how deeply human creativity can be intertwined with environmental understanding and spiritual belief. Despite advances in modern science, the full explanation for their remarkable preservation remains incomplete, just leaving room for wonder and further exploration. In this sense, the Wandjina are not only figures painted on stone, they are enduring symbols of mystery, bridging the gap between the known and the unknown, and inviting us to look more closely at the hidden knowledge embedded in the past. What do you think allows the colors of the Wandjina to survive for thousands of years? Lost ancient techniques, or a mystery we still cannot fully explain? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The La Almoya Palace complex, nestled in the rugged hills of southeastern Spain, stands as one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries associated with the El Argar civilization of the Bronze Age, dating back roughly between 2200 and 1550 BCE. At first glance, it may appear as just another ancient settlement reduced to stone foundations and fragmented walls, yet beneath its weathered surface lies compelling evidence of a society that was far more sophisticated, organized, and technologically capable than previously imagined for its time. What distinguishes La Almoya from countless other prehistoric sites is not merely its age or its artifacts, but the unmistakable impression that its builders possessed a deep understanding of architecture, engineering, and spatial planning, knowledge that seems strikingly advanced, almost anachronistic when compared to other contemporary cultures across Europe. As archaeologists began to uncover its structures layer by layer, a new narrative emerged, one that challenges long-held assumptions about the limits of Bronze Age societies and forces us to reconsider how early complex systems of governance, construction, and social organization truly developed. At the heart of this complex lies a large rectangular hall, often interpreted as a form of early political assembly space, complete with stone benches arranged along the walls and a central open area that could accommodate dozens of individuals. While this alone is remarkable, it is the architectural precision and planning behind such a structure that truly demands attention. The hall was not randomly constructed. Rather, it reflects a deliberate design in which proportions, symmetry, and functionality were carefully balanced. The walls were built using well-selected stones, fitted together with a level of consistency that suggests standardized construction methods rather than improvised building. Even more striking is the evidence that these structures were part of multi-level constructions, indicating that the inhabitants of La Almoya were capable of creating buildings with vertical complexity, an achievement that requires not only technical skill, but also an understanding of load distribution, structural stability, and material limitations. Such knowledge is not typically associated with societies of this era, raising questions about how it was acquired and transmitted. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of La Almoya lies in its sophisticated approach to urban planning and infrastructure, particularly its drainage and water management systems. Archaeological findings reveal that the settlement was equipped with carefully designed channels and drainage paths, allowing water to be directed away from living spaces and communal areas. This suggests that the builders were acutely aware of environmental challenges such as rainfall and erosion, and had developed effective strategies to mitigate their impact. The presence of such systems implies a level of foresight and planning that goes far beyond basic survival, pointing instead to a community that prioritized durability, hygiene, and long-term sustainability. Then it is difficult to reconcile this level of engineering with the conventional image of Bronze Age settlements as relatively simple and rudimentary. Instead, La Almoya appears as a site where architecture and environment were integrated into a coherent and functional whole. Equally intriguing is the apparent standardization in construction techniques observed across different parts of the complex. Walls, floors, and structural elements exhibit consistent patterns in size, alignment, and composition, suggesting that the builders followed established guidelines or shared knowledge systems. This raises the possibility that specialized labor roles existed within the society, including skilled builders or architects who possessed advanced technical expertise. The coordination required to construct such a complex would have necessitated not only individual skill, but also collective organization, resource management, and possibly centralized authority to oversee large-scale building efforts. In this sense, the architecture of La Almoya becomes a reflection of its social structure, revealing a community capable of mobilizing labor and knowledge in a highly efficient and controlled manner. The use of materials further underscores the advanced nature of construction at La Almoya. Stones were not simply gathered and stacked. They were selected, shaped, and positioned with clear intent. Floors were often reinforced, and certain areas show signs of deliberate leveling, indicating that the builders took great care to create stable and even surfaces. The durability of these structures, yes, many of which have survived in recognizable form for thousands of years, speaks to the effectiveness of their methods. It is worth considering that these techniques were developed without the aid of metal tools as advanced as those found in later periods, making their achievements even more remarkable. How did they achieve such precision with the limited technology available to them? This question remains one of the central mysteries surrounding the site. Beneath the surface of these architectural achievements lies an even deeper enigma: the apparent disappearance of such advanced construction knowledge following the decline of the El Agar civilization. Around 1550 BCE, the culture that built La Almoya seems to have collapsed or transformed abruptly, leaving behind little evidence of continuity in subsequent societies in the region. The techniques, planning strategies, and architectural sophistication evident at the site do not appear to have been directly inherited or replicated at the same level in later settlements. This raises a troubling possibility that a significant body of practical knowledge accumulated over generations was lost or abandoned. Whether this was due to environmental changes, social upheaval, resource depletion, or external pressures remains unclear, but the result is a historical gap that continues to puzzle researchers. Adding another layer to this mystery is the discovery of elite burials within the complex, including a particularly notable tomb located beneath the assembly hall. The placement of such a burial in a central and symbolically significant location suggests a close relationship between political power, social hierarchy, and architectural space. It is possible that the individuals interred there played a direct role in the planning or construction of the complex, or at the very least, held authority over those who did. This connection between leadership and built environment further reinforces the idea that La Almoya was not merely a settlement, but a carefully designed center of power, where architecture served both practical and symbolic functions. When viewed as a whole, the La Almoya Palace complex challenges us to rethink what we believe about the capabilities of ancient societies. Its advanced construction techniques, integrated infrastructure, up an organized layout point to a level of development that seems to anticipate later civilizations by centuries, if not millennia. Rather than fitting neatly into the established timeline of gradual technological progress, La Almoya stands as an anomaly, a site that appears to leap ahead of its time, only to vanish without a clear legacy. It invites us to consider the possibility that human history is not a simple, linear progression, but a complex tapestry of advances, regressions, and lost knowledge. In the end, the true significance of La Almoya may lie not only in what it reveals, but in what it conceals. Each stone, each wall, each carefully constructed space hints at a deeper understanding that we have yet to fully grasp. The builders of this complex were not merely surviving, they were innovating, organizing, and shaping their environment in ways that continue to surprise modern observers. Their achievements, preserved in the silent ruins of La Almoya, stand as a testament to the ingenuity of a civilization that, despite its disappearance, still has much to teach us, if only we can learn how to read the clues it left behind. Do you think the advanced construction knowledge of La Almoya was truly lost, or could it still be hidden somewhere, waiting to be rediscovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The city of Kerma stands as one of the most fascinating yet underappreciated civilizations of the ancient world. A powerful urban center that flourished along the Nile in what is now northern Sudan between roughly 2500 and 1500 BCE. At a time when ancient Egypt was rising to dominance, Kerma emerged not as a peripheral culture, but as a formidable rival, controlling key trade routes that linked Central Africa with the Mediterranean. Through these networks flowed gold, ivory, incense, and exotic goods, enriching the city and allowing it to develop a complex society with its own architectural styles, burial traditions, and technological achievements. Yet, unlike Egypt, Kerma left behind no deciphered written language, and as a result, its story is reconstructed almost entirely through archaeological remains. silent evidence that hints at a civilization far more sophisticated than once believed. Dominating the landscape of Kerma are the massive mud brick structures known as defufas, particularly the western defufa, which rises nearly 18 meters above the surrounding plain. These monumental buildings defy expectations of mud brick construction, their scale and durability suggesting advanced knowledge of engineering and materials. The structures likely served religious or administrative purposes, with complex internal layouts that indicate careful planning and social organization. Their survival over thousands of years raises important questions. How did Kerma's builders achieve such resilience with seemingly fragile materials? And what rituals or political functions took place within these towering forms? The defufas remain among the most enigmatic architectural achievements in ancient Africa, challenging assumptions about technological limitations in early societies. Equally compelling is the vast cemetery of Kerma, one of the largest known in the ancient world, where thousands of graves stretch across the desert. The most prominent burials belong to the rulers of the city, interred beneath enormous circular mounds known as tumuli. Within these tombs, archaeologists have uncovered not only rich grave goods, jewelry, weapons, and finely crafted objects, but also the remains of multiple individuals buried alongside the deceased. In some cases, dozens or even hundreds of people appear to have been interred at the same time, leading to the widely held theory that human sacrifice was practiced as part of royal funerary rituals. This discovery opens a window into the beliefs and power structures of Kerma society, suggesting a worldview in which the afterlife required companionship, service, or symbolic displays of authority. Yet, the true nature of these burials remains uncertain. Were these individuals willing participants in a sacred rite or victims of coercion? The lack of written records leaves this question unresolved, adding a haunting dimension to the archaeological record. However, among all the remarkable aspects of Kerma, it is the city's ceramics that stand out as perhaps its most astonishing and least understood achievement. Kerma pottery, particularly the distinctive black-topped red ware, represents a level of technical mastery that continues to puzzle modern researchers. At first glance, these vessels appear elegantly simple, smooth, balanced forms with clean lines and minimal decoration, but closer examination reveals a sophistication that borders on extraordinary. The most striking feature is the seamless gradient from a deep, lustrous black at the rim to a rich, warm red across the body of the vessel. This effect is not painted or applied after firing. It is created entirely through the firing process itself, requiring precise control over temperature and atmospheric conditions within the kiln. To achieve such a result, Kerma potters must have possessed an intimate understanding of how clay reacts to different firing environments. The red coloration typically forms in an oxidizing atmosphere, where sufficient oxygen allows iron compounds in the clay to produce red hues, while the black coloration results from a reducing environment, where limited oxygen causes carbon to be absorbed into the surface. The challenge lies in creating both conditions within a single firing process and doing so with consistent precision. Modern attempts to replicate this technique using reconstructed ancient kilns have often fallen short, producing uneven transitions or inconsistent coloration. The uniformity seen in authentic Kerma pottery suggests a level of skill and control that is difficult to reconcile with the presumed technological limitations of the time. Even more impressive is the surface finish of these vessels. The blackened rims often exhibit a mirror-like sheen, achieved through a process known as burnishing. It's in which the surface is polished with a hard, smooth object before firing. This not only enhances the visual appeal, but also compresses the clay particles, making the vessel less porous and more durable. The result is pottery that is both functional and aesthetically refined, combining practicality with a striking visual identity. The consistency of this craftsmanship across numerous archaeological layers indicates that these techniques were not isolated innovations, but part of a well-established and carefully maintained tradition. This raises further questions about the organization of Kerma society. The production of such high-quality ceramics on a large scale suggests the presence of specialized artisans, possibly working within structured workshops or under the patronage of elites. The knowledge of these techniques must have been transmitted across generations, likely through apprenticeship systems, yet without written documentation. The exact mechanisms of this transmission remain unknown. Were these methods closely guarded secrets, passed only to a select few? Or were they widely shared skills embedded within the cultural fabric of the community? The answers remain elusive, deepening the mystery. The significance of Kerma pottery may also extend beyond its technical aspects. The distinctive black and red style could have held symbolic meaning, perhaps related to religious beliefs, social status, or cultural identity. The vessels are frequently found in burial contexts, suggesting they played a role in funerary practices and may have been intended for use in the afterlife. If so, and their meticulous craftsmanship would reflect not only technical expertise, but also spiritual importance, embodying values and beliefs that we can only partially reconstruct today. Despite its achievements, Kerma's prominence eventually came to an end. Around 1500 BCE, the expansionist ambitions of Egypt's new kingdom brought military campaigns deep into Nubia, culminating in the conquest of Kerma. The details of this transition remain unclear. Some archaeological evidence points to destruction, while other findings suggest a degree of continuity and cultural blending. What is certain is that Kerma did not simply vanish without a trace. Its cultural and technological legacy persisted, influencing subsequent Nubian kingdoms such as Kush, which would later rise to power in the same region. In the end, just the city of Kerma stands as a powerful reminder that the ancient world was far more diverse and interconnected than traditional narratives have often suggested. Its monumental architecture, complex burial practices, and especially its astonishing ceramic technology challenge long-held assumptions about the capabilities of early African civilizations. Yet, for all that has been uncovered, Kerma remains a civilization defined as much by its mysteries as by its achievements. Without written records, its people speak to us only through the objects they left behind, objects that continue to inspire wonder, raise questions, and hint at knowledge that has not yet been fully rediscovered. Do you think the people of Kerma developed their advanced pottery techniques on their own, or were they influenced by another civilization? Share your thoughts in the comments below.